Storytime, my boyfriend was a pathological liar. So a little background information, I was 17 when I started dating this guy who we're going to call Jack, and he was 17 about to turn 18. Or so I thought, because 3 months into our relationship, my mom somehow randomly found photos from his graduation in 2021. I was really hurt that he lied to me, and I planned on confronting him. But also in the back of my head, I knew that even when I went to confront him, I still wouldn't give a shit and I would still date him. So anyways, fast forward, I confront him. He lies about it, of course. And my mom was like my best friend, so anytime that she noticed anything weird, she would tell me about it, obviously. Like, my mom started realizing that he would try to make his life match mine as much as possible. For example, I had just moved to the suburbs, but I was originally from the city, and apparently so was he. I have 8 siblings, and apparently he does also, but I only met 3 of them. Fast forward, of course this leads me to develop serious trust issues, like for part 2. Part 2, my boyfriend was a pathological liar. So like I said, my mom started realizing that he would try to make his life as close to mine as possible, which led me to develop serious trust issues. Like, I would hate whenever he would go out with his friends to parties, hang out around girls, because he literally had such an issue with lying. So fast forward, our relationship turns into a long distance relationship, and then he lied about how he's going to some private school and about how his dad is dying of cancer. And his siblings literally just played along with it. Like, I get, like, ride or die, but at the same time, your sibling is a pathological liar. Go get him some help. Anyway, so while he's at this, quote, private school, he was really away at college. Finally, I confront him one more time, and he admits that he lied. He's actually 19, which I knew was a lie again. He was actually 20 years old. And this went on for a long time. Eventually, I decided to leave him, but now I have super bad trust issues. Storytime, my best friend who was obsessed with me turned out to be a weirdo. So a little background information, I was 15 years old and about to go into my sophomore year of high school. And up until this point in my life, I had moved around to a bunch of different schools almost my whole life. Thankfully, this move seemed permanent. But with that said, making friends has never been my strong suit, so I didn't really hang out with anybody for like the first month. Fast forward, there was this new girl who joined our class, and my teacher asked me to show her around, which I was excited about since I hadn't made any friends yet. And as I'm showing her around, she's like, oh, I need to use the bathroom. So I'm like, okay, and I show her to the bathroom and I wait outside. And when she came out, she abruptly asked me, do you just ever smell your period blood? I'm not gonna lie, I was kind of grossed out, but I thought she was joking, so I laughed and I was like, no, what the hell? But she was dead serious with no laughter at all. She's like, no, I'm serious. Do you ever smell it? And then I awkwardly say no, and I suggest that we go to our class. And then everything was good for about 2 weeks, and she wasn't being weird. She was honestly fun to be around. And then the one day on the bus, she did something really weird, like for part 2. Storytime about my psychotic ex-girlfriend. So a little background information, I was 22 years old and I was working and I had started dating this girl who we're going to call Maddie. And she told me that before we got together, she had been involved in a relationship with a minor, which kind of threw me off, but I decided to look past it. But I found it a little bit sus that she was still going to bonfires that were being thrown by high schoolers. But that's besides the point. Now, both her and I's families were not wealthy at all, but she ended up telling me that she was pregnant, so my family and I let her move in with us. From day one, my family tried warning me about this girl. They were like, yeah, Maddie leaves the house dressed provocatively. We just think it's weird that she's pregnant and she's not going out with you whenever she's dressed like this. Well, whenever my family told me about her leaving dressed like that, I called her, and she was claiming that she went to go and visit a family member. Later on, I found out that she was trying to cheat on me. After this caused us to have tons of arguments. This is whenever I realized this girl was psycho. My mom had offered to drive her and I to her ultrasound appointment, like for part 2. Storytime about my psycho ex-girlfriend. So like I said, the one day my mom offers to drive us to her ultrasound appointment, so her and my mom come and pick me up, and my girlfriend Maddie's acting super strange. So my mom and I, we ask her, like, do you not want to go? Like, do you want to leave? And she's like, no, everything's fine. And then whenever we get to her appointment, so my mom and I are waiting in the waiting room. And then all of a sudden, 6 police officers rush into the doctor's office, and they're all standing around me with their hands on their guns. And they said that they were told by Maddie that I was holding her against her will, and a bunch of other shit that wasn't true. So when my mom explained to them what was going on, they let me go. But then later I found out that Maddie had called her mom asking her to call the cops just to say that, so that way she would be able to leave, because she was tired of dating me. So at this point, I'm like, whatever. Fast forward, she has the baby, and then she calls me and tells me that it's mine. Let me tell y'all something. She was pregnant way before her and I even started dating. Like for part 3. Story time about how my best friend and I were dating the same guy. So a little background information, I was 15 and it was my freshman year of high school. And I had been dating this guy for 3 months who we're gonna call Jacob. He was a part of the popular group and was known for cheating on all his past girlfriends. But why would I see that as a red flag? Because I'm fucking dumb. Anyways, of course he was cheating on me too, and people would tell me that. First I wanted to leave him, but the problem was he came from a super rich family and he was really cute. So in reality, I really only wanted to stay with him so that way he would keep spoiling me with expensive gifts. He would literally buy me anything and everything I wanted. So my best friend, who we can call Taylor, she came over for a sleepover. The whole night we talked about Jacob cheating on me and she asked me why I had not broken up with him yet. So I told her why I wouldn't leave and then she hyped me up. She was like, period sis, do what you gotta do. Well then I came up with this super good plan for my best friend and I both to get gifts from him and use him. So then I came out and I said, you should be his side chick. Like for part 2. Part 2 about how my best friend and I were dating the same guy. So like I said before, he was cheating on me 24/7, but he was spending money on me 24/7. That's the reason why I wouldn't leave him. So then I told my best friend that she should be his side chick. So that way we could both use him for his money. So Taylor started flirting with him to try and make him want her too. And I may have given it a little push by giving her his Snapchat, so she tried to slide in his DMs and then also tried texting him on Snapchat. At first, his cheating ass did not want to do anything with her. And I was like, the one time. Anyways, he was like, I'm with your best friend right now. I don't think we should do this. But of course, like all boys who cheat, he ended up meeting up with her. And they started sneaking around. Meanwhile, I knew all the tea. Taylor was telling me everything. Taylor started getting things from him 24/7 and he looked so stupid. Well, then we decided to fuck with him one more time. Like for part 3. Story time about how my best friend and I were dating the same guy at the same time. So like I said, she was sneaking around with him. Meanwhile, she was telling me everything. He was buying her gifts, he was buying me gifts, so everything was perfect. But we had one little trick left up our sleeves. We decided that we would both make a wish list and put everything that we wanted on there. And at the end of the month, we would have a sleepover, bring everything that we got. Well, on the night of the sleepover, we brought everything, and let me tell you, this filled up my king-size bed. There was stuff all on the floor. So what did I do? I took a video of it, and I uploaded it to Instagram, tagging him and his friends, and wrote a long-ass caption, basically saying, if you cross me, this is what will happen. You'll get played. He was so embarrassed, his friends and everyone at school basically laughed at his dumb ass. Well, he ended up telling his mommy about it, and they came and talked to my parents, and they pretty much just told them to get the fuck over it, like your son did what he did willingly. She didn't do anything wrong. She meaning me. My dad was kind of mad at me, but my mom was super impressed about it, and we laugh about it all the time. Story time about how somebody stole my $12,000 dog at a house party. So a little background information, I was 17 and a junior in high school, and I decided to throw a party at my house before winter break. So usually whenever I threw parties, I would always have everybody in the basement because I had a pretty big basement. There was a sliding glass door to the outside, so nobody had to go upstairs to get in or get out. And I would always lock the door to the upstairs just in case anybody decided to wander up the stairs. And because I didn't think anybody would get in upstairs, I let my dogs run around the house. So everybody who I invited showed up, and I guess that my address got leaked because a bunch of random people started showing up at my house. And it's not like I didn't have neighbors. No, I lived in a very tight cul-de-sac. So people were parking in front of my neighbors' driveways, in my neighbors' driveways. So I called my parents, and eventually I had to have my neighbors call the cops on my house party. My own party. Like for part 2. Part 2 about how somebody stole my $12,000 dog at my house party. So like I said, I had to call my parents and they got the cops called on the house so that way I could get everybody that I did not know out of the freaking house. Thankfully, my friends and I hadn't started drinking yet because literally 5 minutes after my friends showed up, random people started showing up in big groups. So after everybody clears out, I go to walk upstairs and I have my keys in my hand ready to unlock the door. The door was literally busted open. Like somebody had to have kicked the doorknob because the frame was cracked, the door was cracked, it was bad. So I'm freaking out. I wasn't even thinking about my dog at the time until my friend Kirsten asked to see my new puppy. Because Kirsten had just got home from college and she had only ever seen the dog over FaceTime. So we're searching all over the house and we cannot find my fucking dog. Well, when my parents got home that night, they pretty much grounded me for life. But then I want to say a month later, my friend Jake, who was there that night, called me freaking the fuck out. Like for part 3. Part 3 about how my $12,000 dog got stolen at my house party. So like I said, we couldn't find Mimi. My parents pretty much grounded me for life. I get a call from my friend Jake, who was there that night, the night of the party. And he's like flipping out. He's like, I think I know who took Mimi, aka my dog. So I'm like freaking out. I go into the kitchen, I put him on speakerphone so that way my parents can hear. And he was like, well, my girlfriend Avery has this one girl who was at the party that night on Snapchat. And I was like, okay, and what the fuck about it? And he was like, well, the one night we were laying in bed together and she was going through people's Snapchat stories and then she got onto this girl's private story. And I told her, that's my friend's dog, the one that got stolen. So then we looked her up on Instagram, we went on her Visco, and she has a crap ton of pictures of your dog on her Visco. So somehow his girlfriend Avery finds this girl's address. My parents were like, oh, we want to call the police. Somehow I talked them out of doing that. Long story short, I went to her house, I got my dog back after telling her parents about it, but when I was leaving, I ran over her. Story time about my toxic best friend group. So a little background information. I was 16, and it was the end of 9th grade going into summer break. And one day, randomly, these 3 girls added me on Snapchat and put me into a group chat. Now, I had seen them around school, but I never said hi to them. I was finding it very hard to make friends in 9th grade because everybody was so toxic. Anyways, like I said, they added me to a group chat, and all of them said hi to me. And usually I wouldn't respond to random people on Snapchat, but because I had seen them around school, I decided why not. And it was so random. They just started sending pictures of themselves into this group chat, and it low-key made me feel bad because I kind of hated my physical appearance. But anyways, they asked me if I wanted to be friends with them. Oh, and by the way, their names were Stacy, Savannah, and Emily. So of course I said yeah because it was hard for me to make friends. So fast forward, my birthday was coming up. So they asked me if we could hang out. They said they wanted to give me an early birthday present. So I said yes, of course. Like for part 2. Part 2 about my toxic friend group. So like I said, they asked me if we could hang out to give me an early birthday present. So I said yeah. And Emily had a pool at her house, so they asked me if I wanted to go over there. And of course I said yeah, it was summertime and it was hot outside. Well, when I got there, they asked me to order the pizza and they said that I had to pay for it. So I said yeah, because they were my besties at the time. So I used some of my birthday money to pay for the pizza for all of us. And when I got back to Emily's house, they were all already in the pool. So I was kind of mad. 1, because they didn't go with me, and 2, they were just hanging out without me. So we're sitting there eating the pizza. And then after, all 3 of them get in the pool and they start taking pictures with each other, not even asking me to be in any pictures. So at that point, I was so annoyed. I was just like, you guys are being so rude. And Emily's like, what are you talking about? We didn't even do anything. And then, of course, Stacy and Savannah agreed. So I was like, 1, you didn't even ask me to be in any pictures and you made me pay for the pizza for all of us. And she was like, you're ugly. We didn't want you in the pictures. So I threw the pizza away and went. Story time about how I found my uncle sleeping with my best friend. So a little background information. I was 18 at the time and a freshman in college. My uncle was a National Guard. And we were the same age, we went to the same school, and we also had the same friends. And while he was away, I had made one friend that he didn't know about. Her and I became best friends, we got into the same college, and we were in the same dorm room together. Well, the one day my uncle came to my college to surprise me. I ran up to him, I gave him a big hug, and my best friend was super confused because I had never introduced them. And when I introduced them, there was this weird, awkward vibe. So all 3 of us went back to the dorm room, and I asked her if it was okay that he spent the night, because I didn't want to be that person to just invade her space. So she ended up saying yes, and eventually we all got really hungry, and we all wanted Chick-fil-A, so I went and I left them all alone in the room together. Like for part 2. Part 2 about how I found my uncle sleeping with my best friend. So like I said, I went to go get us Chick-fil-A and I left them in the dorm all alone together. While I was waiting in line, I called them to ask what they wanted and nobody answered the phone. So I was like, okay, whatever, you know, it's fine. They're probably just busy talking. So I low-key took a long time because I went to the grocery store to get some cookies. I was just craving them. So then I get back to the dorm room. As soon as I open the door, I see both of them unclothed on top of each other on the bed, doing the nasty. So for some reason, I had a broom and I threw it at my uncle and I went to my friend's apartment that night. And when I told my mom about it, she said that it was my fault because weirdly enough, they praised all the boys in my family. Story time about how my best friend started seeing my mom. So we're gonna call my best friend Joey. Joey and I had been best friends since we were 4 years old, and my family was really close with his and vice versa. And she had always been really nice to him. Of course, because he was a family friend and he was my best friend. Well, one day I thought that she liked him a little bit more than she liked me. She would always ask the weirdest questions. Like, oh, is Joey single? Or what's Joey's sexuality? Like, sis had a whole ass husband. But at the time, I didn't think anything of it because I just thought that she really wanted him and I to date. But when he turned 15, things started getting a little bit weirder. Like, sometimes he would go over my house right after school, even when I wasn't there, to hang out with my mother. And usually the only time he was at the house was whenever him and I were hanging out. Well, the one day I walked in and they were both sitting on the couch talking. And when they both saw me, they acted like nothing was wrong with it. Like for part 2 about how my best friend started seeing my mom. So like I said, the one day I come home after school and they're both sitting on the couch already talking. And they look at me and say hi as if nothing was wrong with the situation. And then after that, Joey started mentioning how my mom was so hot. And I was like, yeah, no, she's pretty, but that's it. Well, the one day my mom left for work earlier than she usually does. So I messaged my dad and asked him if he wanted to hang out. So of course he said yes, and 5 hours later I came home and I go upstairs. And I'm just like hearing things from my mother's bedroom. So I go up and I open the door. And because I don't want this video to get taken down, you guys probably can guess what I saw. So I ran out of the room, ran downstairs. I start panicking. And Joey came and hugged me and said, I'm sorry, me and your mom just love each other. So I told them both they were absolutely disgusting. So then my mom starts crying and begging me to forgive her. And now I live with my dad. Story time about the worst day of my life. So a little background information. I was 16 at the time, and I was either in 8th grade or 9th grade, but I really don't remember. And I had this boyfriend who we are going to call Cameron. We had been dating for 3 years, but before him and I got together, we were best friends. Well, I also was in a friend group with myself, Amber, and this girl named Sky. Now, I wouldn't really call Sky a pick-me girl. She was more of a jealous best friend. For example, the one day we went shopping for dresses, and I picked this one out that I really liked and that looked super good on me. Amber was like, OMG, you look so beautiful. And then Sky, she was like, that dress is ugly and it makes you look fat. Well, after that, I told her I didn't care what she said and that I was going to get the dress anyways. Well, she didn't like the fact that I wasn't going to listen to her, so she didn't talk to me for 2 whole weeks. And then after, she texted me saying that she forgives me, even though I didn't apologize, but okay. Well then, me being stupid, I introduced her to my boyfriend. Bad idea, like for part 2. Part 2 about the worst day of my life. So like I said, me being stupid, I introduced her to my boyfriend. Well, after that, Cameron started acting really weird. Like him and I, we would literally hang out with each other 24/7. And now he was always too busy for me and we would only talk at school. And because I was in all the smart classes and stuff, I would go over to his house to tutor him. Because, you know, I was like the one who was winning every single fucking award for being smart. Well, I came over on the day that I would usually tutor him. And when I went over there, his mom was like, oh, he's busy. He's out with his friends. So then I went home and I got bored and I opened Instagram. Well, I see that he's at a party with Sky and they didn't even invite me. So I asked him about it, and he said, oh, it was her and her boyfriend's party. So I was like, that wasn't really an excuse for why you didn't invite me. So he apologized, and I forgave him. Well, 5 weeks later, I found out that him and her did the nasty, and she got pregnant. And then there was a rumor going around that they made out in the bathroom. So I blocked both of them and never saw them again. Story time about how my husband accidentally told me that he was cheating on me. So just some background information. My husband and I got engaged 2 years ago. And this whole situation happened a month after we got married. So fast forward, it's a Sunday morning. Well, usually every week on Sunday, I clean the whole house. So I woke up, went into the bathroom to take my ring off, and I could not get it off. Mind you, I had gained a little bit of weight since my husband and I got engaged. Anyways, I tried butter, I tried soap, I tried everything, even oil. So after trying to get it off for an hour straight, my finger was 3 times bigger than it usually is. So at this point, I'm really scared that I'm going to have to get it cut off. Because 1, I didn't want to ruin it. And 2, it was really expensive. So I call my husband and he's like, oh, call your dad. Firefighters always know what to do. So I called my dad and thank God he lived 5 minutes away because he drove over really quickly. Like for part 2. Part 2 of how my husband accidentally told me that he was cheating on me. So like I said, my dad lived 5 minutes away, so he just rushed over to my house. And we tried a few more things to get it off. We tried Windex, we tried the dental floss, none of it was working. So my dad told me that we were gonna have to cut it off with pliers. So he comes over with the pliers, cuts the ring off. Well, a few days later, I had taken it to the same place that we got it to get the band fixed. Or replaced. While I was there, I decided to get it appraised, just for insurance reasons. So a few days later, I go and pick up my ring. And when I get home, I look at the appraisal. It was not the same one that I had picked out in the store. It looked exactly like it, but there was like a $20,000 price difference. So right now I'm like, what the fuck? I'm not mad about the money part. I'm more mad that my husband lied to me. I was more upset about the fact that he had lied to me. So I had made dinner reservations for the next night so that way I could hopefully bring up the conversation about it, like for part 3. Part 3 of how my husband accidentally told me that he was cheating on me. So like I said, I had made reservations for him and I to go out to dinner so that way I could hopefully spark up the conversation about it. So when we finally sat down, I had started up the conversation. I had told him that when I took my ring in to get it fixed, I also got it appraised. And his face immediately changed after that, but he wasn't saying anything. He was like, oh, okay, how did that go? So at this point, I was tired of beating around the bush, and I was like, why wouldn't you just tell me if we were having money troubles? And he was like, what do you mean? We're not having any money troubles. I'm fine. One thing about my husband is that he is very wealthy, and he takes pride in the fact that he is very wealthy. So obviously, me right there kind of questioning his wealth, he fucked up and told me the truth. He was like, well, I'm gonna be honest with you. I accidentally gave the ring that I was supposed to give you to a girl I was seeing at the time, and I just never got around to replacing yours. So fast forward to present day, I am currently moving all of my stuff out of our house and filing for divorce. Story time about why my mom kicked me out when I was 16. So a little background information. This had all started as soon as my dad left my mom and I. I was like 13 around the time. Well, ever since then, my mom would have different guys in and out of the house all the time. Like, we were lucky if a month went by and she was still with the same dude. Which, I mean, I kind of get it because my dad did leave us for a woman that he had started another family with. But at the same time, it was just a whole mess. Anyway, so she had got with this new guy, and we're gonna call him Tyler. And by the way, the dudes that she would date, they would literally live at our house. Anyway, so a week after he moved in, I started getting really close to him, which usually never happens. Usually I would try to keep my distance because I knew how wrong it was of her having all these different guys in the house when I'm only 16. Anyways, every time that my mom would go to work, he would invite me to go see a movie, and he would just be really flirty with me. And he was only 6 years older than me, and my mom was 32. You do the math. Anyways, like for part 2. Part 2 about why my mom kicked me out when I was 16. So like I said, the guy was being super flirty with me, inviting me to the movies when my mom wasn't home and all that stuff. Well, then it led to more than just that. By the way, this guy did not have a job, so he was home with me 24/7. And I was doing online school. So we were in the house by ourselves, 12 hours a day, 5 days a week. Anyways, like I said, it led to more, and we started doing the nasty and stuff. Ew, just, yeah. Well, the one day after we got done doing the nasty in my mom's room, we had fell asleep. And yes, we did not have clothes on. Well, at 2 in the morning, I hear someone pounding on the bedroom door, and my mom worked night shifts. So we get up, he hurries up and gets dressed and tells me to hide under the bed. And he opens the door, and it's my mom's sister. My sister literally lived in the apartment next door. And she was like, oh yeah, neither of you were answering the phone, so she wanted me to check on you guys. Like, where's Elena? And I'm still under the bed naked, like for part 3. Part 3 about why my mom kicked me out when I was 16. So like I said, I'm laying under the bed, no clothes on. She asks where I am. And he's like, oh, she should be in her room. So he goes looking for me everywhere with her. And he's like, oh, well, maybe she's outside on the patio. And I don't know why the hell my mom's sister had a key to our apartment anyways. But she's still looking for me in the apartment, and she looks under the fucking bed. And at first she's like, oh my god, what did he do to you? And I'm trying to tell her nothing, like I made that decision on my own. So she calls my mom right away. My mom comes home. She's screaming at me, and she kicks me out. So I go to my grandma's house, and I told my grandma what happened. And my grandma calls her, and she's like, it's not her fault that you gave her daddy issues. And I'm like, bruh, what the fuck? Child, anyways. So then she goes on Facebook and starts posting about how I'm a whore and a slut and how, like, it isn't her boyfriend's fault at all. So now I story time about how my best friend got with my boyfriend. Whenever I was in 6th grade, my mom had put me in this summer camp. And that's where I met my best friend, Jenna. Well, any boys that I liked at summer camp, Jenna would try and go after them. So fast forward, Jenna and I never went to the same school, which was so nice because I could literally tell her about any guy that I liked and she would not know who the hell it was. Okay guys, real quick before we continue with this story time. Today's story time is sponsored by my favorite investing app called Public. With the app Public, I always know which stocks are trending and what my friends and other awesome people are investing in. So make sure to go click the link in my bio to start investing with as little as $1. Okay guys, back to the story. Well, I decided to invite her to my school's football game, the one that my boyfriend was going to be playing at. So I'm getting ready at my house and we're about to go pick her up, and she tells me that she's going to wear one of her dad's Hawaiian button-up shirts and some jean shorts. So I decided to wear the same thing because I didn't want her to feel uncomfortable because she never met anybody at my school before. Like for part 2. Story time about how my best friend got with my boyfriend part 2. Real quick, sorry this part is really late. TikTok would not let me post this video at all. So I pick her up and she's wearing a completely different outfit than what she told me she was wearing. And the whole time we were at the game, she was bothering me about who my boyfriend was. And because I knew she was a hoe, I definitely did not tell her who it was. Well, the one week I couldn't make it to one of my boyfriend's football games, and Jenna just decided to show up to my school's football games even though she didn't even fucking go there. Well, the one night she met my boyfriend. She texted me about it that night saying, oh, he's super cute, da-da-da-da-da. I asked my boyfriend what he thought of her, and he said that she was weird and she was hitting on all of his friends. So I thought I didn't have to worry about them getting together, right? Wrong. He had invited me to this party and said that I could bring her, so I decided why not give her the benefit of the doubt. Jenna and I had planned on leaving that night because my mom couldn't pick us up in the morning. Well, Jenna ended up spending the night, and I went back there in the morning, and there were hickeys all over my boyfriend's neck. Story time about why my best friend cut me off. So a little background information, I was 24 and I had a full-time job as a nurse, and I had been best friends with this girl since we were in 7th grade. As soon as she turned 21, she got married, had a kid, and just like any young tragic love story, her boyfriend, who was way older than her, left her for some girl who just turned 18. So I ended up letting her move in with me. She had too much pride to go back to her mom's house. I ended up kicking her out of my house though, because she would have random guys over 24/7 and she would smoke you know what in my house. So I had the cops called on me 24/7 because my neighbors could smell it. So fast forward to now, she's living with her mom. Her and I got over that fight, and she decided that she wanted to go to college. I was so proud of her, but she asked me if I could watch her kid when she had to go into school because she was doing mostly online. So of course I said yes, I wanted her to succeed. Like for part 2. Part 2 about why my best friend cut me off. So like I said, she finally decided to go to college. Me being super happy for her, I would watch her kid whenever she would have to go into school. Well, the one night I'm making dinner and her kid's in the living room, I'm in the kitchen, and I go into the living room to tell him that dinner is ready. And I see my dog backed up into a corner and him with a fire poker literally poking my dog. I wouldn't even call it poking, he was pretty much trying to stab my dog. My dog has its ears back, it's shaking with anxiety. So I go over and I rip it out of his hands and I smack his fingers. And I tell him, we do not do that to the dog. Like, what is wrong with you? So my friend comes, picks him up. A few days later, she comes to drop him off again. And she says, hey, can I talk to you? I already knew what it was about, so I was expecting this. She was like, Gavin told me that you hit him last time he was here. And I was like, yeah, he pretty much was stabbing my dog. And then she's like, oh, well, you know, he doesn't mean any harm. He plays with the dogs like that at home. Like, okay, sis, this story time about how I tried to stick up for this kid on the bus, but it got me suspended. So a little background information, I was 12 and in 7th grade. So it was a Wednesday, and when school ended, I got on the afternoon bus. And there was this boy named Josh that I was friends with. So I went and I sat next to him on the bus. After like 5 minutes of us waiting for the bus driver to get back on the bus, this boy named Kai that everybody loves for some reason comes over and rips me out of the seat. After that, he sits down next to Josh and starts punching him and screaming at him. So I grab this kid by his book bag, rip him out of the seat, and I sit next to Josh. I put my headphones in, plug in my phone, and this kid grabs the phone, throws it at the front of the bus. And there weren't any adults on the bus at this time because our bus driver was using the bathroom. And I didn't go up and get my phone because I knew that if I moved, this kid was probably going to hurt Josh again. So then this kid starts trying to punch me. So I punch him in the stomach. An adult comes on the bus, finally. Like for part 2. Part 2 about how I got suspended for trying to stick up for some kid on the bus. So like I said, this kid is starting to try to punch me, so I punch him in the stomach. Finally, an adult gets on the bus. She yells at us to all sit down. And by the way, all the little fucking 12-year-olds had their phones out recording what was happening. So they look at the cameras, they were interviewing some of the kids, and Josh's sister comes up to me, and I was like, oh, shit. Hopefully, she's not going to yell at me. I don't know why she would, but still. She was like, hey, I just wanted to say thank you for sticking up for my brother. So then after a little bit, I hear my name get called on the speaker. Kai, Josh, and I were all called down to the office. All of our parents were there. Kai got a 3-day suspension and I got a 3-week suspension. Even though I literally had scratches all over my freaking arms and Kai didn't even have a bruise on him. Well, my mom, being the boss-ass bitch that she is, she told the school that if they went through with my suspension, she would call the news and tell them that my school was letting kids get away with bullying. Story time about how my mom got with my sister's boyfriend. So a little background information. I was 13 and in 8th grade, and my sister was a senior in high school and she was 17. And my sister always had a new boyfriend. Like after 3 months of dating somebody, they would break up and then she would be with a new guy a month later. And this started whenever she was a sophomore. So yeah, she had a lot of boyfriends. Anyway, so she had started dating this boy, and we're gonna call him Ben. Well, lucky for Ben, whenever they started dating was right around the time when we were supposed to go on our vacation that we take every year. So my mom and dad said that he could come with us. So my sister, who we're gonna call Emily, she decided to bring Ben, and I decided to bring one of my friends, Carly. We drove down, everything was good for the first 2 days, and usually what would happen on this vacation is my dad would end up staying at the hotel and doing work while we were all out doing stuff. So my mom, Ben, and Emily were all out drinking at the bar 24/7. Like for part 2. Part 2 about how my mom got with my sister's boyfriend. So like I said, Emily, Ben, and my mom were out drinking 24/7 at the bar. And since this was a vacation that we took every year, my sister already knew a bunch of people down there. The one night my mom started feeling really sick at the bar, so Ben offered to take her back to the hotel. And at this time, my friend, my dad, and I were all down at the buffet in the hotel. So Ben took my mom upstairs to our hotel room, and my dad was like, "Oh, do you guys want to walk down to the fair?" We said yes, so he told us to go upstairs and get his wallet. So my friend and I go up in the elevator to our room, and I want to say this was about 20 or 30 minutes after Ben and my mom had went upstairs. So we get into the room, we hear the shower running, which was weird because we didn't think anybody was there. So instead of me calling my dad because it might have been a murderer, I go, and the door slightly creaked open, so I look through the door, and obviously I could hear you know what, but hers and his clothes were on the floor. Like for part 3. Story time about how I almost got kidnapped by my online boyfriend. So a little background information, I was 16 and in 11th grade. So a year before this all happened, I posted a picture on Instagram saying, "Add me on Snapchat if you want to be friends." Yes, I was that person. Anyway, so this really cute guy adds me on Snapchat. And after about 3 months talking, he said that he wants to meet me in person. And he didn't sound sus at all, so I was like, sure. So we met at this park that was like 30 minutes away. We met there around 6 o'clock, so when the sun was setting. And he was super nice. It was super romantic. Well, then we went to his house. We watched a movie, and we did the nasty. So after that, he asked me if I want a drink. And what I could have swore was 20 minutes later, I wake up in an abandoned farm shed. No clothes or anything. So I start screaming my head off. I don't have my phone or anything, so I start to run. And then he grabs me. He says, "If you try to run or you try to scream, I am going to kill you." Life for part 2 about how I almost got kidnapped by my online boyfriend. So like I said, I wake up in this abandoned farm shed. I don't have no clothes. I don't have a phone. So I try to run, and he grabs me. He says that if you run, I will kill you. So I was like, okay, fine. What do you want from me? So he starts putting on lingerie and tells me to also put some on so we can take pictures together. What the actual you know what? So after that, he starts crying and he starts telling me his whole life story and how he's not who I think he is. Turns out that he's 32 and he just goes online pretending that he's 17 years old. So I just try to comfort him, right? It ends up working. He brings me my clothes, tells me to run, or else he's going to once again kill me. So I run, I go to this gas station, get picked up by the police, find my parents. Luckily for me, I paid attention to where everything was. He was arrested, he's still in prison to this day, and I got grounded for 3 months. Story time, my best friend slept with my boyfriend on my birthday. So a little background information. I was 16 and a sophomore in high school. Well, I had this best friend who we're going to call Sarah. Her and I became super close over the summertime, but she was like on and off best friends with this other girl who we're gonna call Mackenzie. But I had this boyfriend who I was also really on and off with. And Sarah knew about all the problems within our relationship. Well, I guess I underestimated how close Sarah and Mackenzie were, because everything that I told Sarah, she went back and she told Mackenzie. And not to mention, Mackenzie was really close with my boyfriend. So of course, she told my boyfriend everything that I was saying. This ended up causing a huge fight between my boyfriend and I. Well, the night before my birthday, my boyfriend and I were going back and forth arguing. And around 12 a.m. on my birthday, I forced myself to fall asleep. And at around 1 a.m., I woke up to 20 Snapchat notifications, all from my boyfriend. And when I opened them, I saw the worst thing ever. Like for part 2. Part 2 about how my best friend slept with my boyfriend on my birthday. So like I said, I woke up at around 1 a.m. to 20 Snapchat notifications from my boyfriend. And I saw the absolute worst thing ever. The first 5 notifications were just him calling me names. And then all the other ones were just him doing stuff with my best friend. And you guys can already guess what I mean by doing stuff. So at this point, I was heartbroken, I was pissed off, but of course, because I gotta have the receipts, I went and took a video off my sister's phone of everything that he sent me. In the morning, I woke up to a text from an unknown number, and it turned out to be my boyfriend's best friend saying that him and Sarah were now together. So my boyfriend asked me to meet up and apologize, so I met him at this park, and he apologized to me, telling me that he wanted to get back together with me. But I told him to KMA, and I left. Then Sarah came to my house and keyed my car, and then we fought on my front lawn. And then after that, she was texting me about how she was coming back to my house. Like for part 3.
I've cheated on my husband over 20 times and I don't bother hiding it because I secretly hate him. Disclaimer is not my story time, it's not on my Instagram. My husband is the biggest vagina in the world. Here's a little backstory. He and I met 5 years ago, and as soon as we met, I was the one that was interested in him. Which drives me crazy now, the fact that I chased this man. Disgusting. All I did was ask him out on a date and he said yes. After that, he fell in love with me and I did too. Within the first couple of months of our relationship, I realized that he was extremely sensitive. This man would cry a lot, and his feelings would get hurt very easily. So I basically had to start walking on eggshells to make sure I wouldn't offend him. For example, I once did my own laundry and I didn't do his. Number 1, he was really upset, and number 2, he started crying because he said that I didn't love him enough. His mood swings were all over the place. And then the worst part, he got fired from his job and basically didn't bother looking for another one. He told me that he wanted to live off of his savings for the next couple of years. This man never wanted to pay for anything. If we went out to dinner with his friends, he would never offer to pay for my dinner. His friends would pay for my dinner. I was so beyond embarrassed. I was footing the bill for everything. He barely paid me rent. Part 2 is up. I've cheated on my husband over 20 times and I don't bother hiding it because I secretly hate him. Disclaimer, it's not my story time, it's on Instagram. So aside from him not ever paying for anything and fully expecting me to pay for things, I began to hate him. You might ask me why I married him. He comes from a really rich family, so I thought he would eventually ask his parents for money. But no, he did not. Before I knew it, 3 years had passed. And like I said, he is such a big vagina. He always cries about everything. He was always in a bad mood. He was always getting sick. It got to the point where I couldn't even be around him because every time I was, all he would do was complain about what he was feeling that day. He always had a headache or his back hurt. And so he would ask me to do things for him. I was constantly having to give him massages, was always going to buy him medicine. This man would wake me up at 3 in the morning and go ask me to buy stuff. I was literally taking care of my child. Oh, and let's talk about our sex life. It was boring. He always did the exact same thing, never wanted to try anything new, and basically always complained about having to do things to me because it pained him. So I was completely unsatisfied, like all the time. I began hating him more and more every day. Even the sound of his voice triggers me. You might ask me, do I love him? I do. I care about him, but I'm not in love with him. Part 3 is up. I've cheated on my husband over 20 times and I don't bother hiding it because I secretly hate him. Disclaimer is not my story time, it's on Instagram. After realizing that I was living with a man-child who made me do everything for him, who cried all the time, who was always so sensitive and always needed something, and complained 24/7, I decided to start cheating. A few years ago, I had met a guy through a coworker. We always followed each other on Instagram and I knew that he was attracted to me. And he's pretty hot. And rich and good looking. So I decided to reach out on Instagram and asked him if he wanted to go out. Not only did he say yes, he planned a whole outing. We went hiking and we went to get massages. Then he took me out to dinner. And then we went to his place and had amazing sex. I would see this guy about 3 times a week. Then I started hooking up with another guy that I met at the gym. This guy was really hot, but he didn't have a lot of money, so we never really went out. It was just plain sex, but it was good. About 6 months later, I met another guy. Again, amazing sex. Do you think my husband noticed anything? No. I would talk to these guys on the phone while my husband was in the same room. I would be setting up dates with these guys in the same room as my husband. Do you think he cared? No. I would even wear sexy outfits to go out with them and he never asked anything. He would just say, have fun, and then he would call me to complain about what he was feeling and what he wanted me to buy. Am I terrible for doing this? Story time of how I found out my boyfriend was cheating on me with my cousin. My boyfriend and I had been together for 2.5 years. His family loved me and my family loved him and they expected us to get married. Well, last year when COVID started, we were actually in different countries, so we didn't see each other for 3 months. During those 3 months, we FaceTimed 4 times a day, and we were always texting. He happened to be quarantining in our hometown, so both of our families were in the same place. I was quarantined in a different country. One day, my cousin calls me and tells me that she met a really nice guy on a dating website. I was so happy for her because she had had bad luck with guys. Every single week, her and I would catch up on the phone, and she would tell me how much she liked this guy, and how amazing their dates were, and how amazing he was in bed, how sweet and considerate he was. I couldn't be happier for her. Well, when I finally get back home, my boyfriend is super distant and cold. So naturally, I called my cousin and complained. She told me to give him space. She said I should just leave him alone. And so, like an idiot, I did leave him alone. One day, my cousin calls me and tells me to come over for dinner. When I got there, my boyfriend's car was parked in her garage. I thought it was just her nice way of trying to get us to talk. I walk in and catch them doing the dirty on the couch. Come back for part 2. So I walk in on my cousin and my boyfriend doing the dirty on her couch. They quickly get up from the couch and get dressed. Of course, by that time, I'm in hysterics. I'm crying and yelling. My boyfriend instantly got on his knees and begged me for forgiveness. I went up to my cousin and I punched her right in the face. She wasn't expecting that. And I said, well, this is the guy that you've been dating, isn't it? She said yes, and that she was just trying to find the best way to tell me. And so she just thought the best way to tell me was to get me to walk in on her and him doing the dirty. I punched her again. My boyfriend came to her rescue, though. Instantly went into hero mode, which made me even angrier, so I punched him too. I stormed out of her house and went back to my house. Well, I told my parents everything. And my dad went over to my uncle's house, my cousin's dad, and he told him everything. She was about to turn 19, so he took away her phone and her car. And I get a phone call from my ex, come back for part 3. So my lying, cheating ex calls me and explains to me why he actually slept with my cousin. He said that he was so lonely and that he didn't know what to do, and that the closest thing to me he could find was my cousin. Right, as if that was any comfort to me. He said I should be grateful that I didn't cheat with someone else. I told him he had totally betrayed my trust and that I could never ever trust him again. And then he confessed that she was pregnant and that his parents wanted them to get married. He said he just wanted to give me a heads up. Then he said that we could still be together but just not tell anyone, so basically he wanted me to be his side piece. I couldn't believe the words that were coming out of his mouth. It was like I didn't know this man. Guess what I did? I recorded the entire conversation. So I went straight to my cousin and I let her listen to it. She was so shocked. She couldn't believe that he would offer to have me as a side chick. Well, I also let my uncle listen to it. He went to my ex's house and beat him up. Honestly, that made me sad, but he deserved it. They now have a baby and he's gained 50 pounds. Trust your instincts, girl, and always record your conversations. Also, how cute are my nails? Here's a little story time of what my crazy celebrity ex-boyfriend would get mad at if I did or did not do. He would get mad if I would, for example, go to the DMV and put lip gloss on to take a picture. He said that I was trying to get attention from other guys, and the fact that he wasn't going with me proved that I was trying to get attention from other guys, therefore pick up guys at the DMV. He would also get mad if I showed him too much affection or if I tried to kiss him, because he said that that meant that I was a nymphomaniac and that the only conclusion he could come to was that I was cheating on him because I was a nymphomaniac. So eventually I stopped being affectionate altogether, and that made him think that I didn't want him because I was never affectionate. So I told him one day, well, if I am affectionate, it's bad, but if I'm not affectionate, it's bad. And he said, you're right, so you're stuck. He would also, for some reason, think that I was Lil Wayne's side chick, so anytime a Lil Wayne song came on, I had part 2 of what my celebrity ex-boyfriend would get mad at if I did or didn't do. He would get mad if I answered the phone too quick, because that meant that I was hiding something and I didn't want him to be suspicious, but it also made him mad if I didn't answer the phone quick enough, because that meant that I was definitely doing something bad. He would also get mad if I offered to go over to his place instead of mine, because that meant I was hiding guys in my apartment, in my bathroom and in my closet. So he would randomly show up to my apartment, check underneath my bed, my closets, and my bathrooms. And when he saw that there was no one there, he would storm out and say, I'm gonna catch you one day. He would also get upset if my manager or my agent called me telling me that I had an audition, because it made him envious, although he would say that what they were trying to do was actually pimp me out. He would get so envious and jealous if I had booked a commercial, if I was working on set, or if I had anything going for me in my life other than him. My husband just confessed to me that he settled for me. Disclaimer is not my story time, send me an Instagram. Ugh. My husband and I met when we were in college. My best friend at the time, let's call her Tori. Her and I lived together and were best friends. We did everything together. I mean, we were like sisters. Let's call my husband Jack. Jack came to school and he was a newbie. He had 0 friends, so Tori and I decided to take him in. So the 3 of us went on to become the 3 Musketeers. He would stay over our apartment so much that we actually just asked him to move in. We would cook for each other, help each other study. We would even do each other's laundry whenever somebody needed help. I'm telling you, we were all like a tight-knit family. But I have a confession. As soon as Jack moved in, I started falling in love with him. But at the time, I never had the balls to ever tell him. You see, Tori was considered the prettier of the 2 of us. And I never resented Tori for that, but people made it very clear that she was the prettier one. And she was always the one to get hit on, never me. But one night, we all got drunk and Jack ended up kissing me. He actually even tried to hook up with me, but I said no. Part 2 is up. My husband confessed that he settled for me. Disclaimer, it's not my story time. I sent me on Instagram. That night, he tried to hook up with me, but I said no. Following morning, he actually apologized. At the time, Tori had just started dating another guy. I mean, Tori had a new boyfriend every single week. At the time, I wished I could have one boyfriend. While she had 10, I had 0. This is when I started noticing that Jack was a little jealous of Tori's new relationship. Anytime her new boyfriend would come over, he would get in a really bad mood. I asked him if he was jealous and he said no. A few days later, we all got drunk again and Jack kissed me again. Eventually, we ended up dating and he asked me to be his girlfriend and then we got married. And that all happened within a year. Tori at this time had already gotten married to the guy that she was dating. We actually both had our weddings around the same time. At the time, I felt so lucky that I was able to marry the man that I had fallen in love with in college. I was actually afraid that I would end up alone because I wasn't as pretty as Tori. Fast forward to a year after we all got married. We actually all ended up living in the same cities as well. Tori invited us over for dinner to see their new house. During the dinner, my husband decided to have a few too many drinks. And that's when he blurted out, "I actually liked Tori before I liked you. I only married you because Tori got engaged." They all laughed at this. They clearly thought it was a joke. I laughed it off too. Part 3 is up. My husband confessed to me that he settled for me. Disclaimers are not my story time. I sent me on Instagram. That's when he said in front of everyone that he only married me because he lost his chance with Tori. They all laughed. I mean, even Tori's husband found it funny. When we finally got in the car to head home, I asked him if he actually meant it. He looked at me and he said, "Yeah, I liked Tori before I liked you," and that the only reason he hooked up with me was because he was mad at Tori. I started to cry uncontrollably. This whole time, I never thought he had a thing for Tori. He stops the car and he says, "But I love you," that he had no feelings for Tori anymore. I asked him why he would think that was okay to say out loud. He said he had probably had too many drinks. Yeah, it's the alcohol's fault for sure. When we got home, I asked him again if he really loved me. That's when he explained that the love he has for me is different than the love he had for Tori, and that he was actually infatuated with Tori. That our love was safe love. He said, "Just forget about what I said. It was just a joke. I just wanted to make everyone laugh." That's when I realized that he had made a joke at my cost. And it was all to make Tori laugh. Called Tori the next day and explained everything to her. That's when she confessed that her and Jack had been hooking up in college. That sometimes they would hook up when I was asleep on the couch. That they had even done it on top of the kitchen counter and in my bedroom. I told my husband, and that's when he said that I needed to let it go. That Tori was part of the past. He doesn't even touch me or kiss me. He's always angry and reproaching everything that I did. Thinking about leaving him. We don't have kids yet. What should I do? I'm attracted to my father-in-law and I kind of want to hook up with him. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It's sending me on Instagram. My husband and I met a little over a year ago. We actually met on vacation and we happened to live in the same city, so we decided to go on a date when we got back. 2 months later, we got engaged. My family was completely against it though. My parents thought it was way too quick for us to get married. But here's the thing, I'm 32 and I was desperate at that point for somebody to just ask me to marry them. And looking back, that was completely wrong of me. My parents were so against it that when they met my husband, who was my boyfriend at the time, they told him that we should just date a little bit longer before we even decided to get engaged. But of course, eventually we made the decision on our own and my parents just had to deal with it. By the time we had gotten engaged, I had only met his mom. His dad traveled a lot for work, so he was pretty much never home. So here's a little backstory on my husband. He was born in the same city I was, and his parents had him when they were 14 and 15. They were incredibly young. So his parents were more like his friends. They had so much fun and hung out together. It was always a really good time. We decided to have an engagement party, and that's when I met his dad. And it was infatuation at first sight. Part 2 is I'm attracted to my father-in-law and I kind of want to hook up with him. Disclaimer, is not my story time. It's sending me on Instagram. I decided to start flirting with him a little bit more. I kind of wanted to see what he would say. My parents-in-law invited me and my husband over to their house for barbecue. So I decided to wear a thong bikini. My father-in-law was grilling in the backyard and my mother-in-law was inside making a salad. So of course, I took off all my clothes and I pranced around the pool in my thong bikini. I positioned myself perfectly so that my father-in-law had a great view of my ass. I also went up to him and started talking. I would touch his shoulder every now and then. That's when he said, "If I didn't know any better, I would think that you're flirting with me." Then he smiled. I almost died. I laughed with him too. And then my stupid husband came outside. That was 2 days ago. You guys tell me, but in my opinion, it sounded like he was liking it. For the rest of the barbecue, every time I would turn to look at him, he was always looking at me, so I knew it was working. But now I'm like, what's the goal? Do I really want to ruin my relationship with my husband and ruin his parents' relationship? Or do you think we can keep it on the down low? What should I do? Story time about how my husband died and his best friend won't leave me alone. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It's sending me on Instagram. My husband and I were married for almost a decade. During that time, we had 2 kids. And of course, his passing was completely devastating to our families. And 2 weeks after my husband died, I was still grieving. But his best friend started coming around our house a lot. First, he was very emotional. Him and my husband were best friends for about 7 years. They saw each other almost every day. Not only did they work together, but they also would go to the gym together and pretty much hang out all the time. So I know this guy really, really well. When my husband would invite him over, I never got the feeling that he liked me. I mean, sure, sometimes I caught him staring at me, but I'm beautiful, so I understand. So after my husband passed, he started coming over as in, I want to take care of you, and we would just kind of cry together. I took this as his way of trying to help my husband, you know, so I just thought he was being really sweet. But exactly 1 month after my husband passed away, he started asking me weird questions. Number 1, do you want to start dating again? Number 2, don't you feel lonely at night? Number 3, you're still so young and beautiful. You need to give yourself a chance with someone else. Mind you, I'm still grieving. To these questions, I would usually say no. Obviously, I mean, why would I even be thinking about those things? I didn't put too much mind to the questions, but a few days later, he came over after he had been at a bar. As soon as I opened the door to him, he said, "Can I kiss you?" And then he did without me saying yes. Part 2.
Story time about how this guy was cheating on his girlfriend with me. So a little background information, I was 15 and in 10th grade. And the one day one of my friends, Josh, decided to expose this kid named Caden because this guy Caden posted on his Snapchat story, anybody who's 14 and younger, unadd me. I find it so weird that you little girls are swiping up on my stories calling me cute. So my best friend Josh decides to expose this man and he's like, weren't you just hanging out with a 12-year-old the other day? Make it make sense. So, you know, I only add Caden because I was gonna tell him that he's gross and disgusting for hanging out with 12-year-olds. But after he sent me a picture of his face saying hi, yeah, I immediately fell in love with this man. I know this looks bad. Trust me. I know. Anyways, when I started talking to this kid, I really thought that he was on some fuckboy type shit. He was actually super sweet and really kind.
Bruh.
Like, he never asked me for nudes or anything. He also told me that he was single, so him and I start flirting. And y'all, I really thought that this man was about to be my husband. Now, of course, I low-key doubted him a little bit, so I ended up taking screenshots of every one of our messages. Well, him and I had never actually met in person, but we did have plans to meet up that weekend. So a few days before him and I are supposed to meet up, all of a sudden he literally went ghost. I didn't hear from him all day. And then when I go to Snapchat him, bro has me blocked on almost everything. He had me blocked on Instagram as well, but he had 2 accounts on Instagram and he forgot to block me on the one. And Instagram really snitched on this man because when I clicked on his Instagram, it had the suggested accounts. Some girl with a profile picture of him and her popped up. And she had their date in her bio. They have been dating for a whole fucking year.
Don't be shocked. You're shocked? You're shocked?
So obviously I'm gonna tell her that her man was cheating on her, but whenever I add her on Snapchat, she immediately sends me a message that says, if this is about Caden, I don't want to hear it. So instead of talking to her about Caden, I literally just sent her all of the screenshots from these past 2 weeks that him and I have been talking. The only thing I said after that was, he's been cheating on you with me. But then she literally just responds with a video of them and she's like, okay, thank you. And I'm like, okay. I mean, I personally wouldn't stay with him, but to each their own. Anyways, so fast forward, they're still together, and I'm still blocked on everything. Story time about how I did the nasty with somebody else's boyfriend. Yep. Anyway, so a little background information. I was 15 years old and in 9th grade. But back in 6th grade, I met this boy who we're gonna call Darren. And you know, back then, him and I had a little crush on each other, but we were too scared to tell each other. So nothing ever came of it. Even though I don't know what would have came of that because we were literally in 6th grade. Maybe a 2-day relationship? Who knows? Anyways, so him and I kept in touch. Obviously, we weren't like besties. But you know, we would catch up here and there, and we would talk to other people as well. Well, fast forward to 7th grade. That was a pretty rough year for me. What happened, you might be asking? Well, I had been deemed the school thought because my news got sent around.
And there's people that are dying.
And now all of these guys only wanted to do the nasty with me. The worst part is like I was still super innocent, right? I only sent them because I really liked this kid. And it was one of those situations where I felt pressured to send them because I didn't want him getting bored of me and then breaking up with me or stop talking to me. Because if I'm not gonna send them, somebody else will. So yeah, worst mistake of my life. Anyways, fast forward to January of 2021. Darren puts on his Snapchat, girl best friend with a question mark. You're a hoe. Okay? Like, just say you want some pussy and get it over with. Anyway, so my lonely, desperate ass swipes up, and now him and I start talking. Now, he did have a girlfriend at the time, but they ended up breaking up, which I'm thinking to myself, thank God, because bitch. I realized that I caught feelings for him real quick. But then a week later, what does he do? He goes and gets a girlfriend. Like, I just really felt like the universe was working against me in every single way possible. Anyway, so him and I continue to talk over the next 2 or 3 months, just not in the way that I was hoping we would be talking, if you know what I mean. But during March, just before my 15th birthday, him and I had hung out at the park, and tell me why this man literally kissed me. And then he says to me, I've been waiting 3 years to do that. Like, oh, okay. Pretty funny that you say that because you've had a girlfriend every other freaking week. But obviously I wasn't thinking this at the time, so yes, him and I made out. And I know y'all are wondering, well, did he have a girlfriend at this time? He did. And yes, I knew it was wrong, but did I care? No. The answer is no. Not really. Now, see, this situation right here is what I would call a they problem, right? Because meaning him and his girl collectively have some things that they need to work on within their relationship. That does not involve me. As far as I'm concerned, I'm perfect. They have the issues, not me. Besides, I wasn't friends with this girl, so I owed her no loyalty. Sorry, bae. Anyway, so fast forward a week after my birthday, I decided to invite Darren over, where my very strict and very, very, very religious family and I lived. But I didn't really care about the rules, so that whole no sex before marriage thing, totally out the window. I did not care. Like, it's the 21st century. That doesn't apply to us. Anyway, so he ended up bringing his friend with him, but Darren and I ended up going in the other room, and we did the thing. We did. And then that whole week, his friend was hitting me up, so I ended up inviting his friend over that weekend, but his friend and I literally just made out. We didn't do anything else. Well, fast forward a month, Darren came over for the second time. Well, the second and last time. And you know, of course, we do the nasty. And after he left, I was feeling super insecure because I really, 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 really liked him, but he wouldn't leave his girl for me. So me being upset and emotional, what do? I threatened him. I tell him that either he's gonna break up with his girlfriend or I'm gonna tell her everything. And then guess what he did? He blocked me. Yep. And when I say he blocked me on everything. He blocked me on his socials, he blocked me on her socials. Like, he was not playing games with me at all. But it's like, if you love your girl that much, why are you doing shit with me?
I know I be doing some fucked up things. What I do? But you did a fucked up thing.
That's the real question here. Like, be so for real. But to be honest, I think she found out right away because they broke up literally 2 days later. But fast forward, both of them are super on and off still. And to be honest, I don't really think about him too much anymore because I have a new man and he is literally better than Darren in every single way possible. Even better in bed. Moral of the story, y'all, it is not about the size of the boat, it's about the motion in the ocean. I'm just kidding. That was a quote that was left at the end of this story time. Y'all crack me up. Story time about how my boyfriend cheated on me and the girl tried to get her cousin to fight me. So a little background information, I was 14 and in 9th grade, and one of my friends had sent me a picture of my boyfriend, who we are going to call Julio, with another girl. And my boyfriend and I are neighbors, so I told him to meet me outside. I confronted him and I was like, why are people sending me this picture of you with another girl? Like, are you cheating on me or something? Now, let me tell y'all something, okay? Never ask somebody to their face if they are cheating on you. Never. Now, if you have physical evidence, like proof of them cheating, yeah, ask them to see if they'll lie about it, duh. Like, we all have to do that. But if you do not have physical proof, do not ask them if they are cheating on you.
Stupid.
Like, the whole entire reason that they are cheating on you is because they want to eat their cake and have it too. Anyways, so I confront him, and just like any other person, he has a long list of excuses excuses. He's like, oh my gosh, absolutely not. That girl is crazy. That picture's from a long time ago when her and I were dating.
Hey, that's pretty good.
You know, I'm not gonna lie, that is actually one of the smarter excuses I've heard, because at that point you're gonna be like, oh, okay, they used to be in a relationship. You're not gonna ask her. Like, that's weird, at least to me. I don't want anything to do with anybody's ex-girlfriends.
Fuck no. And I'ma stand on that.
Anyway, so fast forward a few months, I decided to send that girl a friend request on Facebook, and she accepts it, and then she posts a story tagging who? My boyfriend. So then I kindly ask her if she's dating him, and then she goes, that's none of your fucking business. So me, on the other hand, you know, still trying to be the calm one because there's no reason to be hasty about the situation. I tell her that him and I have been dating and that I think he's cheating on me with her. Her and I get into a very heated argument when, like, girly, the whole point of this was not to argue. I just want to know if my man is cheating on me with you. Like, I hate when the side pieces get an attitude. Like, girl, the chances are after I find out that he's cheating on me with you, you can just have him. Because I am not a f***ing raccoon and I do not dig out the f***ing garbage, and he is garbage. Absolutely not. Anyway, so after a few hours, I end up calling my man, who was low-key never even my man in the first place, and I kicked his ass to the curb. And he got mad that I messaged this girl. You know what I hate even more than the side piece getting mad whenever you confront them? When your boyfriend gets mad at you for catching him cheating. Like, yes, baby, I went through your phone, texted that girl. Like, cry about it to the side, not me, because I do not have time to deal with that. The next day, a girl shows up at my ex house. So I'm getting super nervous that this girl's gonna try to come to my house and start something with me. Well, fast forward to the next day, my best friend comes over to my house, and there was a car sitting in the middle of the road, very close to my house. And my best friend kept telling me that we needed to leave. But, you know, my dumbass was like, no, we're not going anywhere, blah, 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 blah. It's nothing. Well, it was something. Because the girl who went over to my ex's house pulled up on us. And she got out of the car and tried to fight me. And yeah, it turns out that that girl was the cousin of the girl that he was cheating on me with. Look at him, classy, keeping it in the family. Go off, sis. The girl that he was cheating on me with finally snapped out of her delusion because she found out that she was getting cheated on by my ex with her cousin. Her and I talk and she's like, listen, if she tries to pull up on you again, let me know and I'll come and I'll beat her ass. Well, fast forward, that girl ended up having a baby at 16 or 17. And I don't know if it's his or not because after a few weeks, she stopped coming around. And the girl that I originally had beef with, well, actually, let me rephrase that. The girl who originally had beef with me started dating my ex again. Him and I haven't talked since that day, but when he sees me, he literally always stares at me. And he sees me like every day, duh, because we're neighbors. And I'm not gonna lie, I'm still in love with him, but that is the way life goes. Story time about my toxic ex-best friend. So a little background information. I had a very close guy friend who we're gonna call Max. Now, Max was 2 years older than me, but due to our families being super close, him and I became best friends. Growing up, I saw him as kind of an older brother, and then eventually as we grew up, I saw him as my best friend, until I realized that he was actually a terrible person, and I missed all of the signs that he was not a real friend. Like one, our first fight, I told him something that I didn't want anybody else knowing, and what do you know, right after I tell him, my family knows, his family knows, my crush knows, all of our friends know. After this, I probably should have distanced myself, but he apologized and we became friends again. That was sign number one. Sign number two, his huge change in attitude. 1 second, he would be extremely rude to me, and then he would be this really sweet and caring guy, and his apologies were the best. So it was really hard not to forgive him. He was like a master manipulator. Number three, we only talked whenever it was convenient for him. Like seriously, we would never talk unless he needed something, like for part two. Part two about my toxic ex-best friend. I think we left off on sign number three, which was the only time that we would talk was when it was convenient for him. He would never reach out, which left me being the one who was constantly trying to preserve our friendship or whatever was left of it. Like, all of our messages were literally me, and it made me seem really needy, and like I was putting in way too much effort because he would literally answer with the most simple messages. Like, yeah, okay, sure. And he would only talk to me whenever he wasn't with his friends. Sign number four. It felt like he was embarrassed of me. Now, I know that I was 2 years younger than him, but we were still friends, and I really don't think that's that much of a difference. Like, he would never want to be seen with me. The last sign, he would literally always talk about me behind my back. And I thought this was just rumors at first, until finally several people told me that it was not a rumor. He would say things like, oh, she's ugly, she's so immature, she's annoying and childish, she's so annoying. And then I finally decided to cut him off. Because if the bad outweighed the good, was it really worth keeping that person in my life? Story time about my boyfriend's girl best friend. So a little background information, I was 15 and in 9th grade. And my boyfriend Jaden and I have been together for 2 years. In the beginning, everything was great, and then we went over to his best friend's house, which I didn't realize that his best friend was a girl. And at first I liked her. Her name was Anita, and she was super funny, super nice. Well, fast forward, it started to become a routine where he would drop me off at my house, and then I would call him, and he wouldn't pick up until like the 3rd time that I called him, and then he would be like, what's up? I'm hanging out with Anita. And I felt super weird, because while we were on the phone together, him and Anita were in the car just talking to each other, not even acknowledging me. So then the one day I asked him if him and I could hang out, and he said that he wasn't going to bring Anita. Well, he pulls up, and guess who's sitting in the back seat? Anita. And they were playing sexual songs, which made me feel super uncomfortable. And she didn't say one word to Jaden the whole time, but she had so much to say to him while we were on the phone. Like for part 2. Part 2 about my boyfriend's girl best friend. So like I said, he said that he wasn't going to bring Anita with him, and then he pulls up and guess who's in the car? So fast forward 8 months, Jaden and I are doing super good. And the one day we're driving around and he mentions that he has to pick someone up. Yep, Anita and her friend. So fast forward, we picked them up and I was feeling super uncomfortable and pissed off. Because Anita's like rubbing his shoulders and stuff like that. And then they dropped me off at my house. Well, not even 10 minutes later, they get into a car crash. Literally 10 minutes down the street from me, so the girls walk to my house. So we're sitting in the garage, and the girls are talking about how long they've known Jaden for, blah, 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 this and that. And how he drives super careful when Anita's in the car because he really cares about her. So I told Jaden that I'm not okay with him hanging out with Anita. And of course, when I text him, he's drinking with Anita. So then he starts calling me a bunch of names. Jaden and I are still together, and we have a 9-month-old daughter. He still hangs out with Anita, and I still feel weird about it, but I guess I'm just gonna have to...
Story time. Would you call this cheating?
So a little background information, I was 16 and a sophomore in high school, and I was dating this guy who we're gonna call Tom, right? When we started dating, everything was super good. But a little bit into our relationship, I started to get the ick. Anything and everything he would do would literally irritate the hell out of me. So at that point, I told him that we should take a break. So we did. Well, while we were on this little break, I decided to go out with my cousin the one night. And she had brought this guy who she was talking to at the time. We're gonna call him Jake. Jake and I had the same classes in school, but we never really talked to each other. Well, I started to get to know him throughout the night, and I realized we had a lot in common. I felt like he was flirting with me, so I decided to flirt with him. When we got home, I had told her how much I really liked Jake. We ended up FaceTiming and falling asleep on the phone together. We all hung out again the next day, and I invited him back to my house. Like for part 2. Would you consider this cheating? Part 2. So like I said, we all decided to hang out again the next day. It was really cold out, so I invited everybody back to my house. And when we got back to my house, we were watching horror films. And I was cuddling next to Jake on the couch. And listen, I wanted to kiss him really bad, but Tom and I had just gotten done with our so-called break. So I decided to be loyal and not do that. Well, a few days after Jake and I talking, I realized that I wanted to be with him and not Tom. So I decided to end things with Tom, and now Jake and I have been together for 1 year and 2 months, and we couldn't be happier. But every time that we bring up Tom, Jake always tells me that I cheated on him. Would you consider what I did cheating? Story time about how my best friend kissed the guy that I liked right in front of me. So a little background information, I was 14 and in 8th grade. And we're gonna call my best friend Sophia. We were in a friend group of 3. And the other person in our friend group, his name was Josh. And that just happened to be the boy that I really liked. And Sophia knew how much I liked him. Like, I would tell her all the time how excited I was, you know, that we were hanging out. And she would be like, oh my god, I'm so happy for you. Like, you guys would be so cute. Just a bunch of fake shit. So the one day we're all sitting in our free period, super bored, and our friend Dylan says, hey, why don't we play spin the bottle? With a water bottle, of course. So it was us 4 and a few other kids from our class. Well, Sophia decided to spin the bottle first. And of course, who does it land on? Josh. And I'm sitting back like I have nothing to worry about. My best friend wouldn't do that to me. Well, of course I was wrong. I thought she was gonna apologize, but after she gave me a very smirky smile, well, they started hanging out more and I felt extremely left out, so I just decided to forgive her. Story time about how my neighbor killed my dog. So a little background information. When I was about 3 years old, my parents got me a German Shepherd. And my neighbors who lived next to us absolutely loved our dog. And so did their kids. Like, their dad literally put a doggy door in the fence, so that way our dog could go back and forth from our house to his house. Well, when I was about 8 years old, my neighbors decided to sell their house. So he told us that he had to take out the doggy door because the people that were buying his house hated animals. Well, the people who had just bought his house, they ended up moving in before he could take out the doggy door. So our new neighbors asked us if we could put like a piece of plywood in front of the door so that way our dog couldn't get through. And they said that they would do the same to their side of the fence. So my dad said, yeah, he put a piece of plywood in front of there. Well, my dog, Gabe, the one night that my brother let him out, he ended up getting the plywood off of the doggy door. Well, my brother literally had to crawl through the doggy door to get the dog before one of them saw him in the yard. Like part 2 about how my neighbors killed my dog. So like I said, my brother let the dog out and my dog got the piece of plywood off of the door. And my brother had to crawl through the doggy door to get my dog out of our neighbor's yard. So that way our neighbors wouldn't wake up and know that he got through. But whenever my brother went to go get Gabe, he realized that my neighbors didn't even have a piece of plywood on their side of the fence or anything. So my brother told my dad, and my dad went over there the next day to talk to them. And he pretty much said, I'm not going to have a piece of fucking plywood on my side of the fence if you're not going to be doing anything on yours to prevent my dog from going into your yard. And they were like, oh, well, your old neighbors never took out the doggy door. And my dad was like, that's not our fucking fault. Well, then our new neighbors said, if your dog all of a sudden becomes sick or just does not come back, don't be surprised. My dad decided to replace the door himself. Well, once Gabe realized that the doggy door was gone, when we would let him outside, he would literally just sit there and bark at the fence. Well, 2 weeks later, Gabe ended up passing away. And we found out it's because our neighbors were giving him rat poison. Crazy story time about the girl that my dad was having an affair with. So a little background information. My mom and my dad had been married for 10 years. And they had 3 children. Me, who's the oldest, I'm 16. And then my 2 younger sisters. Well, since I was 12 years old, I've lived with my grandma because of some personal issues that went on at home. Well, because I lived with my grandma, I barely ever saw my family because she lived like an hour away. So I was never in any family photos or anything like that. Well, when I was 15, my dad started coming to my grandma's every Friday and taking me out for pizza. And I thought it was because he just wanted to spend time with me. Well, a few months after he started taking me out for pizza every Friday, I found it really odd that he was getting a hotel for the whole weekend and only seeing me on Fridays. So I had talked to my grandma about it. So my grandma told me that he was having an affair. And she said that she didn't care because she absolutely despised my mom. I didn't tell my dad that I knew because I just thought that it would cause issues between us. Well, the next Friday he came up and we went to the pizza place like for part 2. Part 2 about the girl that my dad was having an affair with. So like I said, a few weeks later on a Friday, he takes me out for pizza again. Mind you, we go to the same pizza place every single Friday. Well, we sit down, we're waiting for our pizza. And I notice that there's this girl who keeps staring at me. And I'm like brushing it off, thinking that she's just one of those girls who has an RBF, resting bitch face. So once we were done eating, my dad went to pay. But the pizza place that we were at, they only accepted cash and not card. My dad had to go to the bank, which was like 2 doors down, so it really didn't matter. As soon as he got up and walked out that door, the girl who was staring at me the whole time came straight over and sat down where he was sitting. I'm like, hi. And she just starts going off on me, but not so everybody could hear. She's like, what the fuck is your name? Like, is he cheating on me? Blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, what are you talking about? I'm like, I'm his daughter. She said, no, you're not. He showed me pictures of his daughters before. Like I said before, I wasn't in any family photos. Like for part 3. Part 3 about the crazy ass girl that my dad was having an affair with. So like I said, she comes over, she sits down. She thinks she's confronting me about being just some random girl that my dad's cheating on her with. And then like I had said earlier, I was not in any family photos because I had lived with my grandma for years. So she was like, oh, like, no, he showed me pictures of his kids and stuff like that. So because she thought that I was lying, she went up and tried to fight me. But I grabbed this bitch by her hair and I fucking dragged her. Of course, while I'm beating the shit out of her, my dad walks in. It's like, oh my god, what are you doing to her? Let her go, blah, blah, blah. Everybody else is freaking out at this point. We get kicked out. The cops get called. She goes to jail because originally she put her hands on me. And I decided to press charges. even though my dad begged me not to. So then I confronted him about the fact that he only came up once a week to spend one Friday with me, but he got a hotel and spent the whole weekend with her. So now I still live with my grandma. I don't see my dad anymore. He's still having an affair with this girl. I'm still really pissed off about it, so I kind of just want to tell my mom what he's doing. Story time about how I was sexually harassed twice while working at Walmart. So a little background information. This all happened last year. So originally I was working in a warehouse, but whenever COVID hit, lost my job, I had to get a new job. So I applied at Walmart in the electronics section because they paid more money, period. And on my second day, I finally went and started working in electronics. So they had asked some of the employees to show me around. So while this one employee was showing me around, he took me to the back where the photos were. Well, whenever I got back there, this employee named Terry said, "Oh, she's mine." I just laughed and brushed it off because I felt super uncomfortable and awkward, and he knew I was underage because my name tag was yellow. But even after that, he still kept coming up to me, calling me weird names, just being a total creep. Like, he would keep coming up to me and get super close to me to the point where I could literally feel him fucking breathing on my face. So of course I told my manager about it. They said he's done this before, so I was like, why the fuck is he still here? So they moved me to garden. And while I was working in the gardening section, I met this guy named Jordan. Like for a part two. Part two of how I was sexually harassed twice while working at Walmart. Something I forgot to mention in the first part, I reported Terry several times and they still did nothing about it. So like I said, then I met this kid Jordan, him and I started getting close, and work actually started to become fun. Well, finally, after a month, we decided that we were going to go out to lunch during work. So the day that we went out to lunch, he kept telling me that he needed to tell me something. But he was like beating around the bush the whole time. Like for some reason, he just couldn't get out what he wanted to tell me. But then he kept trying to change the subject like he wasn't the one who brought it up in the first place. I should have took that as a red flag before we went to lunch, but I didn't. So he keeps going on about it in the car, right? And then he's like, I'm not really 20, I'm 25 turning 26. So then for some reason after that, whenever he saw my mood change, this guy has the audacity to start touching my legs, fucking rubbing my inner thigh and shit. I kept telling him to stop. I was like, what the fuck are you doing? So then I told him I'm getting out of the car. And he says, I'm not gonna let you, like for part three. Part three of how I got sexually harassed twice while working at Walmart. So like I said, he wouldn't let me out of the car, but then we got back to work. And then he had the audacity to keep asking if I was okay when he literally just sexually harassed me in the car. So I went to the bathroom, literally had a whole fucking mental breakdown. I called my mom to come get me because I was not finna stay there. So the next time that I went back to work, I grabbed my stuff and I gave it to one of the workers to go and give to a manager and tell them that I was quitting. Well, one of the managers caught me walking out the back door and she was like, what's wrong? So I immediately broke down. I started telling her what was going on. And then a crowd of people came around us being nosy as fuck, listening to what I was saying. And she was like, you're not quitting. I'm gonna take care of this. So she sent me home and she said that she would call me whenever it was taken care of. So 2 days goes past, I'm like, why the fuck hasn't she called? So then I call and I found out that she fired me. So I reported everything to Walmart ethic team and they just closed my case. They basically didn't do shit about it. Oh, and Jordan wasn't really a manager, he was a supervisor. Should I try to take this to court? Story time about how I almost got kidnapped at a grocery store. So a little background information, I was 16 and it was during the summertime. And I was super excited because I had just got my license. But my parents had this idea that if they made me drive around and do all their errands, that I would be a better driver. So I was pretty much like their BITCH. Anyway, so the one night my mom wanted to make this recipe that she saw on TikTok. And she didn't have the right seasonings for it, so who did she tell to go to the store? Yours truly. Me. And on Sundays, the mini market that was in our town would close at 4 o'clock. So I had to drive like 30 minutes away to the nearest Target. And when I got there, I had to park in the back. Because they had like 10 handicap spaces up front, another 10 for when you sit there and they bring your shit out to you, and another 5 whenever you're picking something up that you already ordered. But in all honesty, that didn't bother me because I had never heard about any girls getting trafficked at a grocery store. Like for part 2. Part 2 about how I almost got kidnapped at a grocery store. So like I said, I parked all the way in the back of the parking lot. I mean, okay, not all the way in the back, but I was damn near close. So I go in and I'm not too familiar with this Target. I've only been here a few times because the mini market in my hometown is usually the one that I go to. So I'm looking around and I realize that there's this little girl following me. But it seemed like she was more like keeping an eye on me. Like she would stand like 20 feet behind me, but just like stare at me, you know, peek through the aisles. And she did that for like 10 minutes. But whenever I finally went up to the checkout, she was gone. And this woman came up to me. She was like, oh my gosh, have you seen my daughter? She was running around the store. I don't know where she is. So I described the little girl to her that I saw.
And she was like, yeah, that's her. I can't find her. Will you please help me look for her? And I didn't have the time for this because my parents were going to wring my neck, but I said, okay.
Part 3 about how I was almost kidnapped at a grocery store.
So like I said, she asked me to help look for her daughter, and I was like, I'm going to go tell a Target employee. And she was like, no, don't worry. They're all already looking. They have security all over the place. And she was like, will you help me check the parking lot because I don't know if she left. She was like, I've been having them look for the past 10 minutes. So I didn't think anything of this because I didn't think that some lady would try to kidnap me. So I went into the parking lot with her and I'm like, okay, where do you think she would have went? Like, did you drive here? Did she maybe go to the car? And she was like, no, we live like 5 minutes down the road. Do you think that we could get in your car and drive around? And I said, yeah, because I thought that it would speed up the process. And my dad's truck was really high off the ground. So while we're walking, I'm like, I think someone's under my car. And she was like, what? No, it's probably just the shadow. And I'm like, no, there's someone under my car. So I turn around to walk back into the store and she starts like pulling my arm towards my car. So an employee called the police whenever I went in there, and long story short, they were trying to kidnap me.
Story time about how my aunt kidnapped my dog. So a little background information, I was 14 and in 8th grade. I had a 4-month-old puppy that I would take care of because since I wanted the dog, my parents were like, you have to take care of him, blah, 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 blah. So put him in the crate, went to school, came home, thought everything was good, until my dog is missing. So now I'm like, what the fuck? Because it's literally a 4-month-old puppy. Anyways, I searched around the house to see if he maybe escaped or he was hiding under the beds or something, but he was nowhere to be found. So I asked the neighbors to keep a lookout for him and even put up missing posters everywhere. And when my parents got home, I told them the situation and they were like, oh, honey, he probably ran away, but he'll probably be back tonight. Yeah, fast forward 5 hours, he still wasn't home. So my dad was like, go to sleep. He'll be back in the morning. So I went to sleep, or I tried, but then I couldn't sleep, so I got up and got some melatonin. Like for part 2. Part 2 about how my aunt kidnapped my dog. So like I said, my dad was like, go to sleep, and I went to try to go to sleep, but I couldn't because my dog was freaking missing. So I go downstairs to get some melatonin when I hear my dad talking shit on the phone to my aunt. He was talking about something with the dog, but my dumbass starts walking across the floor and all of a sudden the floor creaks, so I run upstairs, get back into bed, and go to sleep. So the next day after school, I tell my dad I'm going to go to my aunt's house because she didn't live too far away, and I thought, okay, well, maybe she's seen him run around her neighborhood, whatever. And he was like super off about it at first. But he was like, fine, whatever, go to your aunt's house. So I get to her house and I walk in and I hear dogs barking. One dog, because she didn't have any fucking dogs. And I walk over to the backyard and what do you know, my puppy is sitting in her fucking backyard. So I brought my dog home and told my dad. And he got really mad. It turns out he didn't even want the dog in the first place, so he gave her to my aunt. He apologized and we're good now, but story time about how my mom planned to kill me. Yes, I said my mother. So a little background information, I was 16 years old and I was in 11th grade. Now it's not like my mom hated me my whole life, because there was a time whenever she was super happy and she did really love me. Well, it all started whenever my dad had left her. She went into this deep depression. She quit her job. She wouldn't get out of bed in the morning. She stopped cooking, stopped cleaning, and she always blamed me because she thought it was my fault that our dad left, when in reality my dad still texts me all the time asking how I'm doing. All of a sudden, a flip switch, my mom started cooking again, going to work. I never really ate her food because it low-key looked weird, but one day I came home from school and saw her putting rat poison in my food, and I wish I was kidding, but she's fucking crazy. So I said hi, but she didn't answer me, so I tapped her on the shoulder. She turned around and put a knife up to my neck. I ran out the door, called the police, they arrested her, and now I am happily living with my father and my non-crazy story time about the toxic boy that I almost started dating. So a little background information. Him and I both met on a set of a movie that we were in. Well, a few days into filming, he asked me out. So of course I said yes, and it was literally the most amazing first date ever. So he asked for a second date, and I said yes, of course. And the second date was terrible. He literally just tried to get in my pants the whole time. So then he asked me for a third date. And for some reason I said yes, hoping that it was not anything like the second date. And he didn't show up. So I pretty much got stood up. And then he even blocked my number. So a few months go by and I end up moving in with my best friend, about an hour away from where I was living when I met him. Well, the one night she came home and told me that he had messaged her on Instagram, which I thought was funny as hell because my best friend did not swing that way.
So she pretends to flirt with him and asks him to come over. So he drives an hour to our apartment, and when he walks in, he just sees me standing in the kitchen. He immediately walked out.
Story time. Everybody's saying that I cheated on my ex-boyfriend, but I want your guys' opinion. So a little background information. I was a college student, and I had been with this guy who we're gonna call Jacob for about 6 months. Towards the end of his and I's relationship, stuff just started to get really boring, and every day I would get the ick from him. Now, at this time also, I had gotten a new job. While I was working, I had met this guy who we're gonna call Tim. Since I was a college student, I decided to start working more, so Tim and I would see each other literally every day. Him and I really hit it off, like straight away. Not to mention, him and I had a lot of things in common. His sense of humor was great. Well, the one night before work got out, Tim asked for my number, and I said yes. However, since I was still with Jacob, I decided that I was going to break up with him before I texted Tim. So I broke up with him. Fast forward to now, Tim and I are in a super good relationship, but now everyone's saying that I cheated on Jacob. What do you guys think?
Story time about how I got my ex-toxic best friend jumped. So a little background information. I was 16 and a sophomore in high school. And like any of these toxic best friend story times, she was super jealous of me for literally no reason. She would literally try to be better than me in everything. Like when I did a sport or a club, she would join immediately right after. And it wasn't oh, I'm going to join my best friend. No, it was, I'm going to join so that way I can show her that I'm better than her. For example, in 6th grade, I was captain on the volleyball team, and she decided that she was going to try out her sophomore year. She played it off as if she just wanted to try it out, but then I got announced captain, and she was pissed off when she heard that. She literally blocked me on everything, and she came from a super wealthy family, so she was used to getting whatever she wanted. And my whole friend group would literally tell me, you need to stop being friends with her, she's toxic, she's this, she's that. The only thing that stopped me from being friends with her was the blackmail, like for part 2 about how I got my toxic ex-best friend jumped. So like I said, the only thing that was stopping me from not being her friend was the blackmail that she had. Every time that I pissed her off, or even just randomly, she would be like, oh, I'm gonna send this out. I'm gonna expose you. She was just overall a shitty friend. So I had an exposing account on Instagram where I would expose people in my class. It got banned, but she DM'd the account the blackmail. Little did she know it was literally me who was running it. Obviously, I didn't post it, but I showed one of my friends, and we kind of made a plan to get rid of the blackmail. So my birthday was coming up, and I was going to Disney, and my mom said that I could invite 2 friends. Originally, I wasn't going to invite Tessa, but since I had this plan, I invited her and one of my other friends. On the 3rd night, my friend and I decided to take our plan into action. Tessa was sleeping, so I went on her phone, and I went and deleted all the pictures, like for part 3. Part 3 about how I got my toxic ex-best friend jumped. So like I said, on the 3rd night, she was sleeping, so we went on her phone. I deleted all of the blackmail that she had on me, and I even went a step further and screenshotted all of the nudes that she was sending back and forth with older guys, and these guys were way older than her, like way older. And I sent them to myself and deleted the text off of her phone. Fast forward, we drop her off at her house. I stay over my friend's house, and we decide that we're going to post everything to my exposing page. And we also came up with a really good idea. Why not send this to Tessa's parents? So we sent them to her parents. And guys, when I tell you this exposing page had so many people on it, it really did. Somebody was like, OMG, like, please send a face reveal. Like, I won't tell anybody. So what did I do? I sent a picture of Tessa, and that person posted it to their Snapchat story. Fast forward to the first day of school. We're outside for gym class, and 3 girls beat her ass. Story time about how my crazy ass cousin broke up my family. So a little background information. My cousin Brandy has been married to her wife for about 16 years. And they both have 3 kids together, and I live with my brother and sister-in-law, Nora. Both of our families were super close. They were always coming over to our house, vice versa. Now, this is where you gotta keep up. My cousin Brandy started cheating on her wife with Nora's sister, Taylor. And that meant that Taylor was cheating on her boyfriend, and they had 3 kids together also. And this all started happening the night of my nephew's birthday party. They literally did the nasty that day and then showed up at different times to play it off like they weren't doing anything. And nobody really found out about any of this until Thanksgiving of last year, but the drama is still going on till this day, and it only gets worse. My cousin Brandy convinced Taylor to break it off with her boyfriend and completely leave her 3 children for her. Meanwhile, Brandy is still with her wife, Like for part 2. Part 2 about how my crazy ass cousin broke up my family. So like I said, my cousin Brandy talked Taylor into leaving her boyfriend and her 3 kids for her. Meanwhile, Brandy didn't even leave her wife, and she was planning on buying a house and adopting 2 out of the 3 kids that they have. But Taylor was low-key manipulated and low-key ignored every single red flag. So she did just that. She literally broke up her family for Brandy. And to this day, Brandy is still with her wife. And you would have thought that Taylor would have been like, okay, fuck this. But no, actually, instead, Taylor and Brandy decided that they were going to say that Taylor's boyfriend beat them both so he could get sent to jail and they could still do the nasty on the low. And then Brandy twisted the whole situation of what actually went on to make my family cut me, my brother, and my sister-in-law all off. So that way she didn't seem like the bad guy. And now I'm not allowed to see Brandy's daughter, who I'm really close with. Like, she literally will track her location, and if she's even near my house, she'll be grounded.
So we've story time about how I caught my grandma with my dad. So a little background information, I was 16, and it was the first day of 11th grade. Well, my friend wanted me to come to the mall with her after school that day. She was like, screw your grandma's birthday, just come to the mall with me. So the plan was I would sneak onto my best friend's bus after school and skip my grandma's birthday. By the way, my grandma was low-key a hoe. Like, half of her kids won't even bring their husbands around her, because after she got their numbers, she would end up sending nude pictures to them. Anyway, so the end of the day rolls around and I go to my locker to get my book bag when I'm called down to the office. So I go down to the office and my mom is there to pick me up because she said that we needed to do a few things before our grandma's party. Well, my grandma was at our house getting ready and my mom forgot her wallet at home, so when we went back home, I went to go put my book bag in the house. When I walk in and I see my grandma and dad on the couch, and I'm not even gonna say what they were doing, and my mom is walking past them like she didn't see anything. So after that, I called one of my aunts and asked if I could stay with her for a while, and now I don't talk to any of them. Story time about how I saw my boyfriend propose to another girl in front of me. So a little background information. At the time, my boyfriend and I had been together for around 4 years. We had 2 kids together, and our relationship was pretty rocky. Within the first year of us dating, he would cheat on me all the time, and both times that I was pregnant, he would cheat on me also. Now, after I popped out the second kid, our relationship was going pretty well. And if you're wondering why I didn't leave him when he was cheating on me all the time, well, it was mainly because I grew up in a broken home. And remembering how hard it was on me whenever my parents broke up, I didn't want that for them. Well, over the past few months, my boyfriend had been traveling all over the country with his dad, going to meetings and stuff because he was getting ready to take over half the company. Well, fast forward, it's a Thursday, and my boyfriend has a meeting with some associates who flew in from out of state, and later that night we were supposed to get on a flight with our friends to go to the Bahamas. Like for part 2. Part 2 about how my boyfriend literally proposed to another girl right in front of me. So like I said, my boyfriend had a meeting with some associates who flew in from out of town, and that night we were supposed to be on a plane to the Bahamas with our friends. So while he was getting ready for this meeting, I went and I dropped the kids off early, and he went to this meeting, and I drove our luggage over to our friend's house because they were just going to drive us to the airport. So my girlfriend and I are super pumped to go on this trip, so we decided to start drinking early, and we went somewhere to get drinks. She suggests this high-end place because the guy at the bar has a crush on her and always gives her free drinks. So we're sitting there having a really good time drinking at the bar. So while we're sitting there, we hear a bunch of clapping and cheering coming from outside. So us being drunk and nosy, we go out there to see what's going on. And what are the chances I walk out there and my boyfriend is down on one knee in front of another girl? And I'm not very confrontational whenever I drink, so I told my best friend to just take me back to her house. When we got back, it was around 6 p.m. And my boyfriend tells me that he's just gonna meet us at the airport like for part 3.
Oh, well, hello, what's up there? Guess what we're doing today? Yes, it's makeup. It's makeup. That's what I do. I don't do anything else. That's literally all I do. I'm turning myself into a scary snowman. I've got these buttons from Joann's to make them my eyes. It's stuck to the glue. That's not what I meant to do, but I kind of like it. Straight up Coraline vibes right now. Look at that. Who needs sunglasses when you have buttons? I'm just messing around. We're gonna do the latex. A lot of you were concerned about why I was putting glue on my eyebrows in the other video, and I actually got really funny duets for that. But just to let you know, I put glue on my eyebrows so that they don't get ripped off by latex. Okay, but how mentally stable do I look right now? I need to make this look like a carrot. Alright, that's a pretty ugly carrot, but we'll just go with it. I'm gonna do the mouth last because once I do it, I won't be able to talk or drink water. Okay, time to glue my mouth down. Alright, voiceover Valeria coming in here. I glued down my mouth and put buttons everywhere with liquid latex, and then I put fake blood on, and Olaf is literally shaking right.
Story time about how my ex-boyfriend accused me of cheating on an all-girls trip. So a little background information, I was 14 or 15 around the time, and it was the summer of my freshman year. So within the last few weeks of my 8th grade year, one of the more popular boys asked me out, and we're gonna call him Carson. I wasn't like super popular at the school, but I was like a medium maybe. But I was raised in a super strict household, where the only phone that I pretty much had was one that was able to call 911 and my parents. And I especially was not allowed to be talking to boys. So Carson had the great idea of giving me his old phone, and throughout the summer I would text him on there. Well, I started realizing him getting really toxic. Anytime that he would see my Snapchat location change, he would be like, "Where are you going? Why didn't you tell me you were going here?" So I started distancing myself a little bit from him. Also because our relationship was just moving way too fast. Within the first month of us dating, he was talking about wanting to marry me. Like for part 2. Part 2 about how my ex-boyfriend accused me of cheating on him on an all-girls trip. So like I said, I started distancing myself from him because he became too attached and was just way too toxic. Well, I was also in a lot of clubs in school, and a few of them would require me to go on trips. Well, the one that I went on was an all-girls trip, and before I left, I texted Carson letting him know that I wouldn't have my phone all week. Well, on the last night of my trip, there was a girls and boys dance. There was like a group of boys from a different school that we were meeting up with, and I tried staying back at the cabin, but they wouldn't let me. So we started doing dances that required partners, so I was pretty much forced to dance with one of the boys. Well, when I came back home, I got 100 texts from Carson calling me a bunch of nasty names, and you can probably guess them. And somebody got a picture of me dancing with one of the boys, and Carson sent it to me and said, "We're done." So after that, I just ignored him. And then literally that night at 1 a.m., he was texting me saying, "I miss you, please come back to me," like for part 3. Part 3 about how my ex-boyfriend accused me of cheating on him on an all-girls trip. So like I said, I received over 100 messages from him. He got a picture of me dancing with one of the boys and said, "We're done." And then at 1 in the morning, he's like, "I miss you so much. Please don't leave me. Like, I've been doing so bad while you were gone." So of course I didn't accept his apology, and I just blocked him on all my social media. And the next day I wake up to messages on my Instagram, my Snapchat, my Facebook. Like, who even uses that? Unless you're talking to family. Well, then Carson decides to tell everybody at my school about how I'm a lying, cheating scumbag. And now, 3 years later, no good guy from my school wants to date me. So now whenever I'm talking to a guy, I have to make sure that they're not affiliated with Carson in any way. But low-key, I had a really good glow-up, so all the hot boys want to talk to me now. And Carson's pretty much still a scumbag. Story time about the boy across the street who used to stalk me. So a little background information. My parents and I moved into a new house that was literally 5 minutes from where I used to live. But I went to private school, and almost all the other kids in my town went to the public school. So I didn't really know a lot of the kids in my town. Well, a week after we moved in, our neighbors across the street invited us to a barbecue. While we were there, I started talking to our neighbor's older son, and him and I started to get along really well, like in a flirty way. Their older son was a senior, I was a sophomore, and their younger son was a freshman. Well, I kind of talked to the younger son, but he was just like giving me really weird vibes. So for the next few weeks, I started hanging out with their older son a lot, and we would talk all the time. Well, the one day whenever I went over their house, it was super weird. His younger brother kept saying, "Oh, I think I know you from somewhere. Like, I swear I know you." And I'm just like, okay. Well, the one morning I was waiting outside for my mom to pick me up because she worked night shifts and she would just grab me and then take me to my school. And I saw him in his window watching me like for part 2. Part 2 about the boy across the street who used to stalk me. So like I said, I saw him watching me outside his window, but I didn't want to overthink it, so I was just like, no, maybe he's looking at something else. Well, this all started a month after I moved in. Well, it started happening more frequently, so then I told his older brother. We're just going to call the younger brother Mac. So he talked to Mac, and then everything was fine for a week. Just a little information real quick. For the public school, the bus would arrive at 7:40. My private school started at 7 o'clock. So my mom would come and get me at 6:15 because my school was kind of far away. So like I said, it was a week later. Every morning that I would go outside to wait for my mom, Mac would be standing on his porch watching me. Oh, but it gets worse. So one night I was in my bedroom, right? And this is like some scary movie shit. I kept seeing something run past my window. My bedroom was on the first floor. So I told my dad about it and he put cameras outside. Well, Mac's older brother told me that Mac was always interested in my life. So me being a smart ass bitch, I told his older brother that our cameras didn't work, like for part 3. Story time about how my stepmom got with my boyfriend. So a little background information, I was 18 and it was my senior year of high school. And my mom and my dad got a divorce whenever I was 11 years old. My dad moved to a whole other state. My sister went with him, and then my brother and I stayed with my mom. Because my mom said it was a time where we need our mom in our lives. But to be honest, I think she just wanted child support. Anyways, after elementary school, I moved back in with my dad. And at the time, he was dating this woman who we're going to call Carol. And she was like the sweetest girl I'd ever met. I actually called her mom even though they weren't married because I was so close to her. So fast forward, they get married. I'm super happy for them. My senior year of high school, I start dating this guy named Paul. Well, since I was close with Carol, I told her about him first. After a while of him and I dating, she suggested that he should come over for dinner. So I ended up inviting him to this party that my dad hosts every year. And I was super excited. Well, I see him and Carol talking, and I'm super happy because I want him to get along with my family. Like for part 2. Part 2 about how my stepmom got with my boyfriend. So like I said, I invited my boyfriend to this party that my dad hosts every year, and he starts talking to Carol, which I was super happy about because I wanted him to get along with my family. Well, during the party, him and Carol go missing for like half an hour, and there were a ton of people there, and my dad's house was big as fuck. So I was like, okay, maybe he got lost. So finally I find him, and then I asked him where he had been. Then he said that he went to the bathroom, which was extremely weird because I had already showed him where the bathrooms were on the first floor whenever he came to the party. So I was like, whatever. And then Carol came downstairs, but I didn't really think anything of it. Fast forward, I was on my way home from this tutoring class. My friend was driving me because I didn't have a car. But we get home and we hear loud moaning noises all the way outside, and I see Paul's car in my driveway. And I was like, well, it can't be my dad because he's out of town. So I go in, I catch them, I ask them how long it's been going on. They say since the party. So I tell my dad about it, he gives her a second chance, and then I move back in with my mom.
Story time about how my boyfriend almost ruined my relationship with my sister. So a little background information. I was 16 and I was a sophomore in high school at the time. Well, we're gonna call my boyfriend Alex. And whenever Alex and I first started dating, I would literally brag to all my friends about how nice he was, about how he treated me so good. Well, fast forward a few months, him and I were still dating, and originally my sister scared him. But eventually, he had been around long enough to the point where they were super cool. Well, after that, I started realizing some off things. For example, the one night he was texting me, and all of a sudden he just stopped responding. And I knew that he didn't fall asleep because he was still texting my sister. Well, that should have been the first red flag, but as we know, I am blind to seeing red flags. Anyways, I didn't want to seem jealous of my sister, so I just decided to play it cool and act normal. But him, on the other hand, like for part 2. Part 2 of how my boyfriend almost ruined my relationship with my sister. So like I said, I decided to act normal and not be jealous. But him, on the other hand, he started finding reasons for him not to like me, and he was ignoring me. Like, he was just being very standoffish. So the one day, my sister decides to leave her phone open on the couch when she goes to the bathroom, and I had this fantastic idea to go through her phone. Rightfully so. Like, sis, don't be texting my man more than me. That's weird. Well, when I looked, there was nothing. He was just being super nice to her. And with me, on the other hand, his texts were super dry. By the way, my sister and I are twins. But she starts laughing at her phone, and I'm like, what did he say? And they were just typing random letters to each other. She has a better sense of humor than that, so I knew something was off whenever she was laughing at it. And then she says, I have something to tell you, but you have to promise me you won't get mad. And then she tells me that he said that he likes her. Well, after being mad at her for a while, I realized it was his fault. Story time about why you should never, ever, ever do drugs. So a little background information. In my town, on the 15th of June this year, 2 girls got kidnapped in my hometown. So I kind of knew these 2 girls. I mean, they went to my school, but that was really it. Because low-key, I didn't want to be friends with them, and I kind of hated them. They were in 7th grade, I was in 8th grade, so they were probably like a year younger than me. Anyway, so it was a Wednesday, and the last time they had been seen was at 8 p.m. with a 30-year-old man. They were supposedly doing drugs outside of a McDonald's. Well, I guess this man saw that they had been doing drugs, and he wanted some. Before that, I guess he kind of eased into the question because he was like talking to them, getting to know them, and I guess he thought he had a really good shot at getting some drugs. But when he asked, they said no. So then he asked a few more times, and they finally gave them to him, but whenever they got closer, he grabbed both of them, put him in his van, and drove off. And he hid them in his house. Like for part 2. Part 2 of why you should never, ever, ever do drugs.
So like I said, he asked for them again, and finally the girls decided to give him some. But when they got closer, he grabbed both of them and shoved them in his van, drove off. Well, he ended up driving to his house and decided to hide them there. Well, one of the girls' aunts posted something on Facebook saying that both of them were missing, and soon the news made an article that literally said, drug addict and her friend gets kidnapped. They went missing for like 6 days, and on the 22nd of June, they were found. But now they won't stop bragging about how fun it was to get kidnapped. And that is why, still to this day, I absolutely despise these girls. Story time about why I will never ever ride in an Uber ever again. So a little background information. I was 16 and in 11th grade. So my parents decided to go away for the weekend. They wanted to go and visit some family who lived like 2 hours away. So I decided that it was a good idea to invite my friends and my boyfriend and his friends over for a sleepover. And once we were all at my house, we realized that we were pretty bored, so we decided to go to the fair. So we decided to go to the fair around 9:15. But because we were all lazy AF, we decided to just get an Uber to the fair instead of driving. The Uber there was fine. We went, we had a super great time, and then it was time to go home. It said our Uber was going to come at 10:30, but instead it came at 10:45, which I didn't think was a big deal because Ubers are late sometimes. So we all got into the Uber, and mind you, my house was literally 15 minutes away. So I ended up taking a nap because I was really tired, and then I woke up, like for part 2. About why I will never ever ride in an Uber ever again. So like I said, my house was only 15 minutes away, so since I was really tired from the fair, I decided to take a nap. Well, I woke up 20 minutes later and we were in the middle of nowhere. Like when I tell you, we were on a road that literally just kept on going. I asked my boyfriend where we were and he said that we had been on this road for a while. So at this point, we're all texting each other, and all of our friends are saying, no, we're fine, this is the way. So then I look up my address on Google Maps, and we are 45 minutes away from my house. So then I send it in the group chat, and now everybody starts to freak out. Not to mention, our Uber driver was on the phone the whole time, but he had his AirPods in, and we couldn't understand anything that he was saying. So that's when my friend Sophie, she was in the front seat, she shoved the directions in his face, and was like, I think you're going the wrong way. So then he busts a U-turn, and he's yelling at this point on the phone. And an hour later, we make it back to my house. I have a feeling if it wasn't for my friend Sophie, we wouldn't have made it out of there. Story time about how he cheated on his baby mama with me. So a little background information. There was this boy, and we're gonna call him John. John and I knew each other through one of our mutual friends. Well, 24/7, John would post sad quotes on his Snapchat story because him and his girlfriend had just broken up. So I decided that I was going to be Captain Save-A-Ho and be there for him, telling him it was okay, and that everything happens for a reason. Well, eventually, John had developed a huge crush on me. Like, he would flirt with me 24/7, sending me all these cute emojis, and of course, my dumbass fell for it. So after talking for a little bit, him and I started dating. Well, the one day I was on Snapchat going through his story, and he was posting a bunch of funny memes on his story, and I was just laughing until I got to the last thing that he posted on his story. It was this picture of a baby girl saying, I can't wait to meet you from Dada. So with my crazy ass, I jumped on the phone and started cussing him out. And then he goes, what are you talking about? That's my little sister. So let's for part 2. Part 2 about how he cheated on his baby mama with me. So like I said, when I confronted him about it, he said that it was a picture of his baby sister. Always with the Alabama shit. For what reason, I don't know. But he calls me the next day and he starts apologizing about everything. And then he decides to make a new Snapchat account and starts talking to me on there. Thinking that I was just gonna block his other account. He posts a picture of his baby mama. So at this point, my Virgo self and I were done with the bullshit. By the way, he's a Gemini, so if that doesn't explain it, I don't know what will. So I start dating my new man, and I commented on all of his posts. I guess I'm not surprised she's not the only bitch you're fucking with. And if you try lying, I'm going to spill the tea. Like, I just think that it's really funny how females just think that their men are so loyal. Even when you literally expose their man with every piece of evidence. Well, the girl who sent this in has a special message for all of us. I promise you that men ain't shit. Thank you for listening to my TED Talk. Story time, my best friend cheated on his girlfriend with me. So a little background information. So Gavin and I have been best friends ever since we were little. We lived in the same neighborhood, and my parents and his grandparents were like pretty close, I guess. But like everybody in our neighborhood was close with each other. And I always had a huge crush on him. And I would try to like subtly tell him that I liked him.
but he would always be like, "Ew, don't joke with me like that. Like, that's not true." And eventually, I just kind of got the hint that that was his way of telling me, "I don't like you. Stop before I tell you," in a mean way. So when we were in middle school, he was always having these like 2-day relationships with all these girls and everything. And me, not so much, because sis didn't have a glow up until she reached like her sophomore year in high school. And the thing was, I wasn't that best friend who would be like, "Ew, don't date her, like she's ugly," or anything like that. Like, I would totally respect all of his relationships, even if they were 2 days long, but he would literally still block me. Well, the one day we were hanging out at his house, like for part 2 about how my best friend cheated on his girlfriend with me. So like I said, the one night I was at his house and he was on my phone and he was asking me who all these guys were on my Snapchat, and I told him that I had been talking to them, and he was just being super toxic. He was talking shit on every single one of them. So eventually I started dating this guy Trey, and after that he texted me saying that I was gross and everything else, when the next day he literally got a girlfriend. But weirdly enough, he didn't block me that time. He actually started texting me more, saying how him and his girlfriend were so happy together, da-da-da-da-da, and unlike him, I would be supportive. Well, the one night at 2 a.m. he came over my house and he was like, "I don't have feelings for my girlfriend." And I'm like, "Okay, then why are you with her?" And then he has the nerve to say, "Don't you get that I like you?" Like, really? Well, eventually we cut off all communication and he was still with this girl. Well, the one night he asked me to come over and talk, and we ended up doing the nasty. And then he blocked me on everything, after he said we should both leave our girlfriends and boyfriends. Well, I ended up telling his girlfriend what we did, and they also come to my family cookouts.
Part 2, and I was able to get into his phone because he stole my fingerprint from when we were best friends. So I unblocked myself on all social medias, and there was an ottoman pushed against the couch, so while he was sleeping, I was able to go lay next to him. So while I was laying next to him, I took a few pictures of us, and I saved them in his camera roll, and I also sent one to his girlfriend, and it was about 1 in the morning. Well, she opened it right away, and then she started going off and would not stop calling his phone. So after that, I turned his phone off. So he started to wake up, and then we started drinking more, and then we started fooling around. And while we were doing the nasty, I took a video, but he didn't see it because the phone was in front of me. And I had his girlfriend on Snapchat. So what did I do? I sent the motherfucking video to her. So the next day, obviously, he found out what happened. So then he came over to my house to talk to me. And I told him how I was upset that she was keeping him from me. So he broke up with her and started dating me. Story time about how I broke up my best friend and his girlfriend. So it was our sophomore year in high school, and my best friend and I had known each other since we were like 8 years old. And I've always had a crush on him. Like, anytime he would get a girlfriend, I would try and break them up. And it would work. Well, our freshman year of high school, he started dating this one girl. Well, when he started dating her, he distanced himself from me because she didn't like how much time we were spending together. So a few months go by, and my birthday's coming up. And mind you, within these past few months, we only seen each other like twice. And he had me blocked on all social media. Well, our parents were really good friends because we lived in the same cul-de-sac. So my mom invited him and his parents to my birthday party. So at the end of my party, my friends left and him and his parents stayed. And my parents really didn't care if I drank alcohol, so we had like a whole bottle of vodka to ourselves. So we're in the basement and we're taking shots together. Well, I got him super drunk and he fell asleep. And while he was sleeping, I went on his phone and like for part 2.
My father-in-law is forcing my husband to break up with me. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. This is a 3-part story time, and I'm doing a full face of pink makeup today. My husband and I have been married for 2 years. Now, we did get married very, very young. By very young, I mean I was 18 and he was 19. When we started dating in high school, his dad was totally against the relationship. See, my husband was super popular, played on the football team, all the girls chased him, also played basketball, and was perfect at everything he did. As you can imagine, was extremely strict with him. He was not even allowed to go out on weekends. Me, on the other hand, my parents are pretty much hippies. They let me do whatever I want. We're all very spiritual. My parents have full trust in me. Because of this, I make smart decisions. I actively seek my parents' advice. I even told my parents I lost my virginity when I did. And we had a big conversation about it. It was not dramatic. It was not like, oh, you shouldn't have done that. They just support me in everything I do. Now, my husband's parents are not the same. They tell him not to do a lot of things. They try to control him. So as we were dating in high school, his dad kept telling him to break up with me. He claimed that I was holding him back and that because of me, he spent less time cleaning. Which technically, yes, is true. But at the same time, you cannot stop your son from experiencing human relationships. In fact, he actually broke up with me for 2 weeks. But then we got back together in secret. Everything culminated when he asked me to marry him right after graduation. His parents were absolutely against it. But my parents were all for it. You guessed it, go to part 2. My father-in-law wants my husband to break up with me. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. I'm sending me on Instagram. This is a 3-part story time, and I'm doing a full face of pink makeup. When he asked me to marry him right out of high school, his parents absolutely freaked. They went to my parents' house and told me off for saying yes. In other words, they were completely blaming me for the whole thing, as if their own son didn't go buy a ring and ask me to marry him. Even did a beautiful proposal, which he had been planning for months. But at this point, his parents didn't even know that we were boyfriend and girlfriend. When they came to my house, his mom, my now mother-in-law, started crying and yelling at me. She told me that I was ruining their family, that I was trying to steal her son, and that all I really cared about was their money. By the way, my parents were middle class, but we were not destitute. His parents are very rich. They own several businesses. But of course, I'm not after their money. That's when they said that if we did end up getting married, I would have to sign a prenup. Duh, I said, yeah, I want to marry him because I'm in love. At this point, his parents knew they couldn't stop us. We were going to get married with or without their approval. But thankfully, his parents came around and let us get married. We had a quaint, small wedding. It was so magical. But his parents wanted him to go to college to play football. In other words, they wanted him to be the next Tom Brady. They made him train for hours, and they didn't even let us live together for the first year we were married. And because they were supporting him, he couldn't say no. They had us on a schedule. Could only see him for about 2 to 3 hours a day. And we were married. 2 years later, he's playing for a football team. But his parents keep thinking that I'm dragging him down. So now they're trying to convince him to leave me. Go to part 3. My father-in-law is trying to convince my husband to divorce me. Disclaimer, this is not my story time, and this is the final part of the 3-part story time. I'm doing a full face of pink makeup. After a year of us being married, his parents did not allow us to live together because he needed to focus on football. So obviously, I was living with my parents. I was focusing on my own studies, but his parents did allow us to see each other 2 to 3 hours a day. Now, you might think my husband is a total pushover, but let me explain something. His parents paid for all of his training and his entire college tuition. They gave him the best of everything. He got sports massages every single day. They even installed a cold plunge in their backyard. They also had a full gym setup where he and his teammates would go work out every single day in their house. Obviously, he did not have time for little old me. After a year of this, I couldn't take anymore. I wanted to be with my husband. So I gave him an ultimatum. That he tell his parents that he and I wanted to live together. That's all I wanted. I was even willing to pay for half of the rent. And he told his parents, they said fine. And they bought us a house. Obviously under my husband's name, not mine. Fast forward another year up until now. I've heard his dad tell him on several occasions that he needs to divorce me. That he could find a much prettier wife once he becomes bigger in the NFL. And I walked in on his mom telling him that maybe I can't even have kids. And that he should have me checked. My parents-in-law hate me. I sometimes feel like I am holding him back. They make us miserable. My parents think I should just walk away from the marriage, but I'm too in love. Should I confront my parents-in-law? Help me think of what I should say to them.
Story time about my strict grandma. So a little background information. In January 2023, I was really looking forward to having a sleepover at my friend's house. But my grandma quickly shut that shit down because she said that my friend was, quote, emo, according to the way my friend dressed. Like early as 2024. Anyways, I tried to argue with her and say that that doesn't mean that she's a bad influence, but my grandma, stuck in her ways, just wasn't having it. Instead, she said that I was going to be staying the weekend at my aunt's house with my brother and my cousin. So while I was at my aunt's house, I decided to sneak over to my friend Oliver's house. Get your head out of the gutter. It was nothing like that. We both agreed to be strictly friends. Anyway, so I hung out at his house with him and his brother Connor, and we were giving each other's Instagrams a makeover. Now keep this in mind for later. We ended up changing my username to the Beaner 2.0. Oh, and when I said I snuck over Oliver's house, I mean for my grandma. Like, my aunt knew about everything, but my grandma wasn't watching me, so I didn't care to tell her. Fast forward, the weekend's over, my grandma comes to pick us up, and later on that night, she brings up my Instagram username to me. Like for part 2 about my super strict grandma. So like I said, my grandma brings up my username, the Beaner 2.0, to me later on that night. She started telling me that she was super concerned about the lack of self-respect I had for myself, and how I need to start caring more about what other people thought about me. But honestly, I didn't care. I tried explaining that I didn't mind the term beaner since I'm half Mexican, and I've already faced racism before, so to me, it's just a word. After I explained that, I thought that her and I were good because she stopped arguing with me. And then she starts bringing up my Instagram posts. She's like, who are these boys that you were with? Whose house is this? Blah, blah, blah. Because I guess my aunt had told her that I went over a friend's house, but she didn't specify that it was a boy. So my grandma was fine with it. Anyway, so she had a field day with that shit, and the next day she decided to take my phone away because of the consequences of my actions, claiming that this situation was so serious that she had to get the police involved. This whole situation resulted in me being grounded forever, and we had to start attending family therapy sessions after this. Yeah.
Then President Juarez declared May 5th the official anniversary of the Battle of Puebla, which we now know as Cinco de Mayo. Fast forward to the 1980s, something really interesting started happening. Beer companies started capitalizing on Cinco de Mayo. They started marketing their beer based around the holiday. And with that, it blew up. Americans started celebrating Cinco de Mayo everywhere, what we now know as Cinco de Mayo. It's a completely different and commercialized version of what Cinco de Mayo is. I'm sure if you went to any bar celebrating Cinco de Mayo, I think most people in there are not going to know why Cinco de Mayo is celebrated or that there was even a battle that happened in 1862. George W. Bush was the first president to celebrate Cinco de Mayo at the White House.
Cinco de Mayo is a day for special pride and remembrance for people on dos lados de la frontera. It's a reminder of the proud heritage of many Americans.
Nowadays, it seems like people assume that Cinco de Mayo is the Mexican Independence Day, which is completely wrong. That's in September. The U.S. made it into a consumerist holiday. People don't even know why they are celebrating it. And if you haven't followed me already, you should totally follow me, okay? Oh, I'm also a day late, but I was on a plane yesterday, so that's my excuse. Bye!
Get ready with me to go out to the bar with my friends. Usually I'll go to the clubs that are like super busy, but tonight I'm kind of just looking for a chill night where I can just wear my jean shorts and my crop top instead of putting on a whole outfit. And also I really do not feel like having a million other people sweat all over me. I've had a lot of you guys ask me how I do my eyes, so I'm going to show you how I do like my smoky eyeliner wing. First thing that I do is I go in with Tattoo Studio by Maybelline and I do my waterline, and when I do it on the bottom, I stop like right to where my eye is right there. And then after that, I'm gonna go in with eyeliner and I'm just gonna do it very tightly against my lash line. And then after I do that, I'm gonna make a super small wing. Then I'm gonna go in with the tattoo liner again. I'm gonna make a, you know, put a little bit right there. Go in with an angled brush like this. And I just start to pull this up. And then if I feel like it needs to be a little blended out, I'll go in with my beauty blender and I'll just kind of blend it upwards. So then it'll end up looking like this. I just did my mascara on this eye and now we're gonna do it on this one. So we're gonna go in with the Lash Sensational Maybelline, and I just go and I make sure to close my eyes because I don't want to put it at the root. When you put it at the root, it weighs your lashes down. And I just got some PR from Makeup by Mario. These are their Moisture Glow Plumping Lip Serums, so I want to wear one of these tonight. We're gonna try Nude Glow first. Okay, but she's actually kind of cute. This one is Petal Glow. I need to hurry up. Let me know what you guys think down below. I mixed Nude Glow with Petal Glow, and I kind of like...
Storytime about how my boyfriend is abusive to his parents. What should I do? Claim is not my story time. It's on Instagram. My boyfriend and I have been dating for 11 months. Here's a little backstory. We both work at the same company and live very far from our parents. I try to go home once a month since my parents are only 2 hours away from me. His parents live in a different country. For that reason, I haven't met his parents. But he's met my parents and he's been completely respectful and really nice to them. So I never suspected that he could be abusive to his parents. So here's what happened. We flew over to his parents and they are very rich. His mom is an interior designer and their house is phenomenal. His dad owns a couple of businesses and together they are very wealthy. His parents went to pick us up at the airport and everything was fine until we got to their house. They decided to give me a tour of their ginormous mansion. That's when I noticed that my boyfriend was being kind of rude to them. Every time they would ask me a question, he would answer and be like, duh, she likes pizza. He even asked his mom to stop asking stupid questions. I stopped him in his tracks and in front of his parents I said, why are you being rude to your parents? The look on his parents' face was of shock. And that's when I realized that they had never disciplined him. But then it got worse. Part 2 is up. Storytime about how my boyfriend is abusive to his parents. Disclaimer is not my storytime listed on my Instagram. The look on his parents' face when I called him out for being rude to them was complete shock. After they gave me the tour of the house, we decided to sit down for dinner. They are so rich that they have their own chef. That's when the chef comes out and starts serving all the food. And as soon as my boyfriend sees what they served, he grabs his glass of water and bangs it against the table. He looks at both of his parents and says, what the fuck is wrong with you both? The color from their faces drain. That's when they said, I'm sorry, we didn't know he was gonna make this. The chef decided to make a really fancy meatloaf. Apparently he hates meatloaf. Then he said, well, tell him to make something else. His mother gets up and runs to the kitchen and asks the chef to make him a burger because that's his favorite food, which, by the way, I never even knew that. He always told me his favorite food was Indian. His mom comes back from the kitchen. Then he looks at me and says, you don't have to eat that shit if you don't want to. I told him that he was being a brat and that I'd be happy to eat the meatloaf. His parents look at me and smile. My boyfriend just gets up from the table and runs away. Can you believe I had to chase after him? Part 3 is up. Story time about how my boyfriend is abusive to his parents. What should I do? Disclaimer is not my story time. It's me on Instagram. That's when my stupid boyfriend runs away from the dinner table. So of course I have to chase him. And of course I'm angry at this point. I ask him why he's being so rude to his parents. Then he literally denies that he just did anything. His words were, "You're reading too much into it. My parents are stupid anyway." I looked at him and I said, "Do you not see the mansion we're standing in? How did two stupid people manage to build this mansion, 4 businesses, and put you through school?" He rolls his eyes at me and says, "Jesus Christ, you sound like my parents." I told him that he was a privileged rat. You see, I come from a family where we don't have chefs and we don't have millions of dollars or a mansion. So I appreciate everything my parents did for me. I went back to the dining room and I told his parents it was nice to meet them, but that I could no longer be with their son. That's when his mom started begging me not to leave. It was hard, but I called an Uber and I went home. My boyfriend's been begging me to get back with him. He's trying really hard too. His parents are even offering to pay my student loans. I'm honestly confused now. What should I do?
Story time. I was the toxic best friend. So a little background information. I was 16 and a sophomore in high school. And at the beginning of the year, I met this girl who we're going to call Riley. Riley and I hit it off straight away. Like a week after knowing each other, she knew everything about me and I knew everything about her. Well, then she tells me about this guy that she's talking to, who we're going to call Jay. She said that they would hook up sometimes and he would text her sometimes. But she said that I couldn't tell anybody because he said that it had to be a secret. So I tried telling her that he sounded like a fuckboy, but she decided she was going to do whatever she wanted, and I was like, okay. So fast forward to the end of the year, he adds me on Snapchat. Okay, don't get me wrong, he was really hot, but I had my own thing going on, so I really didn't pay that much attention to him, and I thought he maybe added me on Snapchat to be like, oh my god, I really like your best friend. And then I also was caught between a rock and a hard place. Do I tell my best friend that the guy that she likes just added me on Snapchat? Or do I lie to her? Well, I was going to tell her until I got a Snapchat from him, like for part 2. Part 2 about how I was the toxic best friend. So like I said, I didn't know whether I should tell her that he added me on Snapchat or if I should. And I was going to until I got a Snapchat from him saying, "Hey, you're really pretty. I think we should talk sometime." So I ended up telling her about it because I felt really bad. And she was like, "This is why I can't trust girls. Like, you need to unadd him right now. Like, fucking block him." And I'm like, I didn't even do anything. Like, what the fuck? So whatever. I end up blocking him. It's fine. Until he texts me one day. And he's like, "Hey, it's Jay. I think you blocked me on Snapchat, LOL." And him and I had talked a little bit in school and I kind of started to like him. Well, fast forward, him and I ended up hooking up a few times. We were talking a lot and he hadn't been texting Riley as much. Well, the one night while I was sleeping over at her house, my phone was going off a lot and I didn't think to delete any of the messages, like for part 3.
Story time about how I found out my husband was hooking up with men off of Craigslist. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It's not me on Instagram. My husband and I have been married for 5 years. This man is the most prudish person I have ever met in my entire life. He never curses. He does not drink. Basically, he's never done anything naughty in his life. When we met, he was the perfect candidate for me. My parents are very religious and very strict. When they saw the way my husband was, basically super uptight, never wanting to do anything fun, they insisted that I marry him. So basically, this is all my parents' fault. To be honest with you guys, I never really was super attracted to him, but I knew that he would be a good provider. He's pretty high up in the company he works for, and he makes north of $300,000 per year. But I do own 2 of my own businesses, so it's not like I need him to survive. But my parents insisted on me marrying somebody who was already well off. And of course, one of my dreams is to become a mother, so I need a man who's going to be able to provide for me and my kids, especially when I'm pregnant. So we ended up getting married. Was there passion and chemistry? Not so much. But we did have a good time, and he would make me laugh. We essentially became really good friends. Up until I found some stuff on his laptop. Part 2 is that. Part 2 of how I found out my husband was hooking up with men off of Craigslist. Disclaimer, is not my story time. It's me on Instagram. One day while I was working from home, I needed to get on his laptop to check our cameras. I just gotten a new set of security cameras for our house. I needed to make sure that they were all working. I opened his laptop, typed in the password, and it was wrong. It always had the same password for the past 5 years. I didn't bother texting him. Instead, I tried to guess. And because I know this man so well, I guessed it in the first try. But as soon as I log in, there's about 5 Craigslist windows open, all with similar titles. Male looking for male. Male interested in male company. This literally shook me to my core. You're telling me that I'm married to a gay man and that he's hooking up with men off of Craigslist? That's when I went ahead and checked his email, only to find that he had been sending pictures and other things to these men. Not only that, but he had met with 2 of them. I instantly printed out all the evidence. Like I said in part 1, I'm not particularly attracted to my husband. I never have been. I really only married him because my parents pressured me into it. Here's what I did. Instead of just asking for a divorce, I wanted to humiliate him. I needed to make him pay. After printing everything out, I send it to his job. And I sent it to his parents and my parents. Part 3 is up. That's when I sent videos of my own husband hooking up with other men to his job, my parents, and his parents. At this point, I had been married to a man that I wasn't attracted to for 5 years, only to find out that he was hooking up with other men. Off of Craigslist. Remember I said in part 1 how prudish my husband was? He always made himself seem like he was the perfect man, like he had never done anything bad in his life. But let me tell you, some of the things I read in those emails, and the pictures, and the video, disgusting. No wonder he put off having kids for so long, and no wonder he made me get on the pill, because he never had the intention of having kids. When everyone received their packages, my husband called me super upset. He said that he had only done it for about a week, and that it was just him experimenting. And he told me that his job put him on suspension. My parents, of course, stopped speaking to him. My mother-in-law calls me on the phone and tells me that she had always known that he was gay. And apparently they insisted on him not marrying me. But he was set on having the perfect wife. The perfect life. We're obviously getting a divorce now, and I'm getting all his money. Or at least I'm gonna try. He's already claiming that I'm obsessed with him, so he wants to get a restraining order. I need to make him suffer even more. How should I do this? Part 4 will be up soon.
Storytime about why I will never let my sister pet sit for me ever again. So a little background information. I was 18 and it was the summer before my freshman year in college. And it was towards the end of the summer, so I decided that I wanted to take a vacation with a few of my girlfriends before we all went off to the different colleges that we were going to. And I have a lot of pets. I have 4 hamsters, 2 snakes, a tarantula, 2 birds, and 1 fish. So I asked her if she could watch all of them. She said yeah, so I wrote her out a schedule of when they need to be fed. And I wasn't even going to be gone a week, so it would be pretty easy because I already cleaned all their tanks and everything like that. And I wasn't worried at all because I trusted my sister. She had 2 dogs and a cat, so I thought she was going to be fine. I called her the first 2 days. Everything seemed to be going well. And I called her on the 4th day, and she didn't answer the phone. So I called my mom, asked her if she could get a hold of her. And my mom said that she spent the 2 days at her boyfriend's house, like for part 2. Part 2 about why I will never let my sister pet sit for me ever again. So like I said, I called my mom asking if she could get a hold of her, and she said that she spent the last 2 days at her boyfriend's house. The worst part was, my sister was the only one with a key to my apartment. So my sister calls me the next day and she's like, hey, sorry, like I was at my boyfriend's house. And I was like, who fed the animals? And she was like, well, I just put enough in their cages so that way they would be fine for like 3 days. And she was like, don't worry, I'll sleep over there tonight to make sure they're okay. So I'm like having a fucking panic attack right now. Anyways, so fast forward, I get home early in the morning and my sister's sleeping on the couch, but my sister brought over her animals too. So I wake my sister up and I'm like, hey, like, how are all the animals? She's like, oh, they're fine. And then we walk into the kitchen and the fucking bird cage is open and my birds are missing and her cats are nowhere to be found. So now I'm freaking the fuck out. So then I go to check on the rest of my animals, like for part 3. Part 3 about why I will never let my sister pet sit for me ever again. So like I said, we walk into the kitchen and the bird cage is open and my birds are nowhere to be found and neither is her cat. So at that point, I run to check on all of my other animals. Thankfully, the snakes were fine, so I go to check on my tarantula and he's missing. So now I grabbed my sister's dogs, locked them in my room, and I went to go check on my hamsters. Yeah, she forgot to feed them the whole week because one of them ate the other one. So at this point, I'm having like a mental fucking breakdown and I'm moving all the furniture in the living room and everything like that. And we lift up the couch and we see her cat bolt out from under the couch. After that, I look under the couch and my bird is literally torn into pieces under the fucking couch. A few days later, she texted me and she was like, hey, like, I feel so bad. Like, let me buy you a new bird and a new tarantula. And to this day, 2 years later, I still don't know what happened.
This is how I found out my dad was following me on OnlyFans. Disclaimer, it's not my story time, it's on Instagram. My mom and dad had me when they were really young. My mom was 17 and my dad was 19. For some reason, my mom doesn't like talking about him, so I never really found out exactly how they broke up. All I know is that they stayed together until I was 5 years old. Something really bad happened and then my mom kicked him out of the house. Like I said, I don't even know what happened. I was 12 years old, he begged my mom to come back, and she let him live in the apartment we had. But he's pretty much a deadbeat. He didn't help my mom pay for the bills. He didn't even want to get a job. He even went as far as begging my mom to become a stripper. He said that she would make way more money than the job she had. She was a secretary at the time. When I was 15, he left our house again. I never got a bad feeling from him when he was living with us though. With a lot of hard work, my mom was able to put me through college. I graduated and I got a really good job. I bought my mom and me a house and we moved in together. Then COVID happened and I lost my job. Friends suggested I start OnlyFans and I decided to do it. I started making a lot more money than I ever thought I would. Some months I was making around $20,000. This one guy would send me $1,000 every single week. In exchange for pictures, part 2 is up. This is how I found out my dad was following me on OnlyFans. Disclaimer is not my story time, it's on my Instagram. So this one guy started sending me $1,000 every single week. In exchange, I would send him private photos. Everything was totally fine until he started asking me questions. He would ask me things like, what's your favorite movie? What's your favorite dessert? Because it's OnlyFans, I never really answered honestly. But then one day he told me, you love The Little Mermaid, don't you? And I was like, what? Because The Little Mermaid was my favorite movie as a kid. Watched it at least 3 times a week when I was a kid. First I thought it was a cousin playing a joke on me, so I decided to block them. The next day I get another message. This one says, I remember how you used to love hot dogs. That's when I really shit myself, because my dad and I would make hot dogs every single Friday. It was our thing together. Like I said, he was a deadbeat, so he couldn't afford anything more than cheap hot dogs. And that's when he said, I have a confession. And before I could reply, he said, I'm your dad. I felt so disgusted. I blocked him and then blocked him from my cell phone too. That's when he sends me a long text message explaining why he signed up to my OnlyFans. He said that he was just trying to get to know me, that all he really wanted was to get me back as his daughter. Then why ask for nudes? Part 3 is up. This is how I found out my dad was following me on OnlyFans. Disclaimer, this is not my story time, it's sending me on Instagram. As soon as I read his long text message about why he signed up, I once again blocked him. 20 minutes later, there's a knock on my door. Yep, it's my fucking father. Started knocking on the door so hard my neighbors came out. Called 911 and they came within a minute. I live in an area where there aren't too many people, so my house is really easy to find. Saw my dad walk to the backyard and try to get in through the back. That's when a cop stopped him and asked him what he was doing. Then he told the cop that I had invited him over. Then the cop comes to my door and asked me if I had invited him. I told him I didn't. Then I told the cop about OnlyFans. My dad was so ashamed he actually denied it. But of course I had all the receipts. Showed the cop my phone and the cop told him that he needed to leave me alone. He left my house and I didn't have the heart to tell my mom. But later that night, I see another person sign up to my OnlyFans. Turns out it was my dad again. This time he was offering me $3,000 for more pictures. And he confessed that he couldn't help but love me as a woman because I didn't grow up with him. Excuse me, sir? You raised me for half of my childhood. Wanted to get a restraining order, but the judge says it's not that easy. So now I'm considering closing my OnlyFans. I don't think it's fair though. What should I do?
Storytime about how my whole class saw my teacher's OF. So a little background information, I was 16 and in 10th grade, and my best friend Maya and I were walking in the hallway getting ready for first period. Now, even this early in the morning, the rumor was already going around that Miss J had an OF. Fast forward, Maya and I get to first period. 10 minutes after class started, Miss J put a problem up on the board. After she gave us a little bit of time, she was like, okay, who can solve this? And as she's about to call on someone, there was this guy, Jake, in my class, who was passing notes to this one girl, Jessica. And if you're wondering why they were passing notes, it's because we were not allowed to have phones in this class, of course. Anyway, so then Miss J is like, can you read that to the class, blah, 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 blah. And the note literally said, did you hear about Miss J's OF? She finished teaching the rest of our class, but we didn't see her for like 3 days after that. And I guess she wasn't fired because she had an OF. It was because there were students subscribed to it. And she knew about those students that were subscribed to it, and she didn't do anything about it.
My roommate's boyfriend keeps harassing me and I don't know how to tell her. Disclaimer is not my story time, it's on Instagram. My roommate and I have been living together for 2 years now. Now, I wouldn't call her my best friend, but we are very close. I don't really talk about intimate things, but at the end of the night, she's always there and we usually have dinner together. Not really close to my family, so to me, it's important that she's there every single night. But here's where things get really shitty. Her and I both got boyfriends around the same time. I met my boyfriend through a friend and he is the sweetest, purest thing ever. This man cries at every single movie, but he travels a lot for work, so he's usually not there. Now, my roommate's boyfriend, he's a personal trainer and I'm pretty sure he takes steroids because he's always angry. Should I say aggressive? His behavior became super obnoxious to me right away. As soon as he would come over to the apartment, he would start saying things like, babe, your roommate is so hot. He would say that about me to my roommate. Of course, she tried to laugh it off, but I know it bothered her. One day, he even started joking about how he was gonna come into my room one night while I was asleep. Obviously, I did not find this funny. That's when I asked him to leave the apartment. He got so mad, he called me a bitch in front of my roommate and slammed a drawer. Do you think my roommate stood up for me? No. Part 2 is up. My roommate's boyfriend keeps harassing me and I don't know how to tell her. Disclaimer's not my story time, it's on my Instagram. After he called me a bitch and left the apartment, I was terrified. First off, this guy is 6'2" and he's built like a truck. He's like pure muscle. So when he's yelling in my face and slamming drawers, of course I'm terrified. But my roommate does nothing. But it gets worse. 2 hours after he left, he sent me a text message saying, fuck you. And then he sends me a picture of him with his tongue out, giving me the middle finger. I got up to show it to my roommate, but that's when she actually asked to talk to me. She sat me down on the couch and she started telling me how he's such a good man, how she's never been able to find anybody like him. Then she asked me if I could just try to get along with him. He even started crying and it broke my heart. So I decided to let it go. But the next time this guy came over, once again he started playing super loud music. I came out of my bedroom because I was trying to work and I asked him nicely to turn it down. At this point my roommate was showering, so it was just him and me in the living room. But then he gets up from the couch and walks slowly towards me, looking me up and down. That's when he says, you wish you had a guy like me. I turned around and tried to walk back to my room, but he grabbed my arm and turned me around. Then he grabbed my face and tried to kiss kiss me. Actually gagged. That's when he said to me that I was just playing and that I actually want him. The whole time he was squeezing my arm so hard, I finally got away and went into my bedroom. And that's when he sent me a picture of his thing. I literally almost died. I walked out and kicked him out again. This time he didn't put up a fuss, but now I don't know how to tell my roommate. What the heck am I gonna do?
Story time. I'm in a long distance relationship and I don't know if I should break up with this boy or not. So a little background information. Him and I were best friends for almost a month before we started dating. And literally as soon as we started dating, he started asking me for nudes. And I would be like, no, not tonight, I'm tired. And then he would keep asking me why. And then he would start to make me feel guilty about not wanting to send him nudes. Eventually, he would just say, it's fine, I'll just wait until we can do physical things together. And he still has, quote, his hoes on Snapchat. And he still has all of their nudes and everything. And literally the day before we started dating, he told me that he liked this one girl. And he'll always hang up the phone to talk to her instead of me. And then when I bring it up, he tries to say that he's... So obviously I try and bring this up to him. And he tries to make me feel bad by saying that he thinks about unaliving himself. He also has a few other red flags, like for part 2. Story time. I'm in a long distance relationship with this boy and I don't know if I should break up with him or not. So like I said, he says he always thinks about unaliving himself, so obviously I feel bad for him and I just love him so much that I can't let him go, and he has a bunch of other red flags. Like he'll tell people he's 13 and other people he's 14, and you know, he apparently didn't know his birthday. Well, fast forward, he's been texting me more, and when I told him I loved him, he left me on open, which he never does. He always says it back to me. We still haven't really been talking on the phone, but I did send him pictures. Not fully nude, but both times I sent those, he literally called me right after. But other than that, he will never call me.
My boyfriend's brother got me pregnant and now I don't know what to do. 3 months ago I started dating this new guy. He was so sweet and good looking. He took me to meet his very rich family right away. I walked into their beautiful house and his brother came right up to me and gave me a kiss. Now let me say this. My boyfriend and his brother are almost exactly identical. They are both extremely good looking. They're both super muscular and really good shape. They both have long brown hair. They both have green eyes and tan skin. I mean, they are virtually perfect looking. Here's the difference. My boyfriend is so sweet, while his brother is more of a bad boy. Flirts with me in front of his whole family. And they all think it's hilarious, even my boyfriend. But here's the problem. The more I visited their house, the more I realized I was getting butterflies every time I saw his brother. And it's like his brother knew it. He would look deep into my eyes while we had conversations. He always looked like he was about to kiss me. One day my mother-in-law decided to take me shopping to Bloomingdale's. She ended up buying me a $2,000 necklace. These people have money. When we got back to the mansion, I decided to put the necklace on. But as I was struggling, my boyfriend's brother decided to help me out. Slowly put the necklace on me. Then he started smelling my neck. Then he started kissing my neck. And then he started kissing me and we started making out. I couldn't help it. Part 2 is up. That's when my brother-in-law started kissing my neck. Then he made his way to my mouth, and we started making out, passionately. I physically couldn't stop myself from kissing him. After we kissed for a minute, we realized we were in the kitchen. Anybody could walk in on us. That's when he grabbed my hand and took me outside by the pool. He took me behind the pool house, and then we just started kissing more. We were back there for like 20 minutes. So my phone rings, and it's my boyfriend, his brother. I push him off, and I run back into the house. For the rest of the night, he just kept staring at me, and I basically just tried to avoid his gaze. We didn't talk about the fact that we kissed at all for like 2 weeks. After the 2 weeks, I found myself alone in their house again. He comes up to me and starts trying to kiss me again, but this time I did have a little more self-control. He did something I never expected. He picked me up straight off the couch, threw me over his shoulder, and took me to his bedroom. Then he started kissing me more. And again, I gave in. I couldn't help myself. It's like I physically can't stop myself from touching him. He kissed on his bed, and then it happened. Yep, we did it. It was amazing and magical, but I instantly felt remorse. Let me clear something up though. I am still very, very attracted to my boyfriend. I mean, if anything, I would have rather done it with him, but there's just something about his brother that I find intoxicating. I instantly felt sick to my stomach. I left his room and went back home. My boyfriend called me and asked me why I wasn't waiting for him at his house. I told him that I didn't feel sick, so he came over and brought me chicken soup. I just did the dirty with his brother and he bought me chicken soup. You can imagine how guilty I felt. 2 weeks later, I wasn't getting my period. So I took a test and it turns out I'm pregnant. And I'm pretty sure it's his brother's. I broke the news to him and his family that I'm pregnant and they're so happy. He proposed to me and we're engaged now. His brother, on the other hand, still tries to kiss me. But he just got a new girlfriend. We'll never tell the truth though. Or should I?
Storytime. Karma didn't do its job fast enough, so I had to take matters into my own hands. So a little background information, my best friend Ellie had just passed away in a car crash, and for some reason these two girls, Jackie and Jayla, decided that they were going to talk shit on her all the time for no reason. Like, they had some weird, unhealthy obsession with her for no reason. Like, the one time they literally put me in a group chat just so that way I could see them talking shit about her. So I told my best friends Christy and Megan about it, and we decided to come up with a plan to jump them. So in the morning and after school, Jayla and Jackie would walk by my house to get to theirs.
So obviously we weren't going to do it in the morning because nobody had the energy for that. But we got baseball bats and everything else. And we did end up using them. Like, we ran up on them after school and we started to beat the out of them. I don't want this video to get taken down, so use your imagination because it was pretty bad. And both of them ended up in the ER. One girl was in a coma for the week and the other one had a broken collarbone. They ended up pressing charges, but my thing is, this is a girl who can't defend herself, so I would have done it anyway. Storytime about why you should stay away from guys who just got out of a long-term relationship. So a little background information. I was 14 and I was in high school. And I had just moved from a normal high school to a special education unit where there was only about 60 to 90 kids. And I met this guy named Robert, and he was supposedly the most popular guy in school. He was a grade above me, and he was super hot. He definitely had a reputation with the girls, and his body count was higher than his age. Well, I have a single stay-at-home mom, and her and I haven't had the best relationship, and she's kind of strict, but also kind of not. Like, for example, sis will let me get my belly button and my tongue pierced, but will not let me hang out with boys. Does that make sense? Absolutely not, but here we are. Well, somehow Robert and I started talking, and then we started dating, and everything was going super good. I was seeing him every day, spending every single hour that I possibly could with him, until I came home one day with a hickey on my neck, like for part 2. Part 2 about why you should stay away from a guy who has just gotten out of a long-term relationship. So like I said, him and I started dating, and the one day I came home with a hickey on my neck. I didn't sleep with him, but him and I were fooling around. But my mom went psychotic. She grounded me. I wasn't allowed to see or speak to Robert ever again, which was stupid because I'm a 14-year-old girl who's in love with a boy. I'm definitely going to find a way to talk to him. So now this led to me thinking that he was going to get bored and not want to be with me anymore. So finally, 2 months later, my mom was letting up and she let me go out with my friend Lauren. But we ended up just going to Lauren's house so that way Robert could come and see me. And I think I forgot to mention a few red flags. All of my friends told me that Robert had an ex-girlfriend of 4 years that he was absolutely in love with. But that wasn't the worst one. He told me that he was never going to get over his ex and that he was always going to want to be with her. And then he asked me to be his girlfriend 2 days later. And we're going to call her Lucy. Well, I posted a few TikToks and Lucy's best friend Ellie commented on my TikToks, like for part 3.
My husband told me he wants a second wife. We are practicing Mormons and my husband believes that he deserves a second wife. When we first got engaged, I told him that the only way I would marry him was if he did not take on more wives. We've been married now for 6 months and he's already begging me to get a second wife. Part of me understands why he wants it, but the other part of me thinks it's just gratuitous. No man needs more than one wife. We met a few single women at church and he's been flirting with them nonstop. One of them in particular has been flirting back. Everyone in our church knows that my husband is not allowed to have another wife. This one girl keeps trying to get into our lives. She basically shows up everywhere we do, and she's always trying to catch his eye when we're at church. I found out a dirty little secret about her. A few years ago, she used to be a stripper. I threatened her to stay away from my husband. If not, I would tell him that she was a stripper. She actually told me that my husband wouldn't believe me and that she was gonna marry him anyway. I caught them texting and she was telling him how lonely she is. I told my husband that she was a stripper and he said that he didn't care. That she needed saving? What the heck should I do now? I don't want a second wife. My husband told me he wants a second wife update. That's when my husband told me that he still wants to marry her and that the church could save her. Since the news of her being a stripper in the past didn't turn him off, I had to start digging some more. I went onto her Facebook and started looking back through all of her pictures. I also went on her friends' and family's Facebooks too. On one of her friends' accounts, I found a post from 2012. They were partying it up in the Greek islands. As I looked closer into the picture, I saw there were 2 men with them. I started Googling the men's names and I found that they were both pimps. The more I searched, the more pictures I found of her with this one guy. And in some of the pictures, they were even making out. This is when it hit me. She was probably a pro. And this guy was pimping her out. My husband is so 2000s that he doesn't even have a computer. So I decided to go print out all of the evidence. I printed out all of the pictures of her and this guy, some of her family's pictures of her drinking and partying. I made my husband his favorite dinner and then I sat him down. I told him I would never accept a second wife, especially her. When I showed him all the pictures, he told me he felt sick. Apparently she told him that she was a nun. Remember I said they had been texting? Well, they never stopped texting. Then he confessed that she even sent him a naked picture. Part 2 is my husband told me he wants a second wife update. And he finally accepted that this woman had been a pro in her past and a stripper. He said that he would stop speaking to her. Mind you, this all happened like 2 days ago. I asked my husband to show me his phone so that I could see the messages between them. He handed his phone over and started to cry. He said that she had lied to him and told him that she was a nun. Apparently, after she became a stripper, she decided to leave that life and become a nun. How stupid is my husband that he actually believed her? That's when I saw that she had sent him plenty of nudes. And I asked my husband, "You think that this woman is a nun?" And he said, "You're right, I should have known." We went to church and told on her. Now everyone in the church knows her truth. But things get get worse. After she found out that we told on her, she came over to our house and started threatening us. Wouldn't let her in the house, but then she begged my husband to let her in, and he opened the damn door. That's when she begged my husband to take her on as a second wife, and that she would be the best wife and even better than I am, while I'm standing right there. Thankfully, my husband used his one brain cell and said no. That's when she grabbed my hair and started banging my head against the wall. Stupid husband stood there watching. I had to fight her off alone. That's when she looked at both of us and said that we would regret it, and she ran away. And my husband had another confession. They had hooked up once. Part 3 is up.
Story time about why my best friend cut me off. So a little background information, I was 24 and I had a full-time job as a nurse, and I have been best friends with this girl since we were in 7th grade. As soon as she turned 21, she got married, had a kid, and just like any young tragic love story, her boyfriend, who was way older than her, left her for some girl who just turned 18. So I ended up letting her move in with me. She had too much pride to go back to her mom's house. I ended up kicking her out of my house though, because she would have random guys over 24/7, and she would smoke you know what in my house. So I had the cops called on me 24/7 because my neighbors could smell it. So fast forward to now, she's living with her mom. Her and I got over that fight, and she decided that she wanted to go to college. I was so proud of her, but she asked me if I could watch her kid when she had to go into school because she was doing mostly online. So of course I said yes, I wanted her to succeed. Like for part 2. Part 2 about why my best friend cut me off. So like I said, she finally decided to go to college. Me being super happy for her, I would watch her kid whenever she would have to go into school. Well, the one night I'm making dinner and her kid's in the living room, I'm in the kitchen, and I go into the living room to tell him that dinner is ready, and I see my dog backed up into a corner and him with a fire poker literally poking my dog. I wouldn't even call it poking, he was pretty much trying to stab my dog. My dog has its ears back, it's shaking with anxiety. So I go over and I rip it out of his hands and I smack his fingers. And I tell him, we do not do that to the dog. Like, what is wrong with you? So my friend comes, picks him up. A few days later, she comes to drop him off again. And she says, hey, can I talk to you? I already knew what it was about, so I was expecting this. She was like, Gavin told me that you hit him last time he was here. And I was like, yeah, he pretty much was stabbing my dog. And then she's like, oh, well, you know, he doesn't mean any harm. He plays with the dogs like that at home. Like, okay, sis, this
Story time about how my best friend walks around naked in front of my boyfriend. Disclaimer is not my story time, it's on me on Instagram. The bitch that used to be my best friend, yeah, she's the worst person in the entire world. By the time I met her, my boyfriend and I had already been going out for 6 months. I met her through some friends and her and I got along really well. She was wild and crazy and she brought that wild and crazy side out of me. And at the time it was something that I did need, but I didn't realize just how wild she was. Let me tell you what this girl was like. She was the type of girl that would try to bring up sex in every conversation. Like, no matter who we were talking to, she would always bring up sex. She would always try to impress everyone about how much she knew about it and how much she needed sex all the time. And sometimes I would ask her to not talk about it so much, and her response to that was, stop being such a prudy bitch. My boyfriend and I decided to have all our friends over at my apartment for dinner. Since I had just met her, I decided to invite her over. This was the first time she was meeting my boyfriend and all of my friends. And of course, she proceeded to monopolize the entire conversation all night, and all she talked about was sex. Then she went to the bathroom and took off her jacket. She came out in her bra and shorts. Part 2 is a story time about how my best friend walks around naked in front of my boyfriend. Disclaimer is not my story time, it's gonna be on Instagram. That's when she came out of the bathroom in her bra and a pair of shorts. Mind you, we have a bunch of our friends over having dinner at my place. I get up from the table and I ask her what's up. That's when she says that it's way too hot in my apartment and that I needed to turn down the temperature. I told her I'd give her a t-shirt if she wanted to, and she said no. I'm comfortable in my body and I don't care if people look at me. When I look around, I see everyone staring at her. Obviously, all the guys are like oogling her goodies, but all the girls that are there with their guys are instantly upset. That's when my boyfriend bursts out laughing and says, what's wrong with her? She just starts laughing maniacally at what my boyfriend said. Then she goes and sits down next to my boyfriend and starts joking with him. You might be thinking I'm so stupid for this, but I decided to let it go. Oh yeah, she's also the type of person that never wants to go home. That's when I had to be honest with her and I told her that she was making everyone uncomfortable. And I asked her to leave, which she did. A few days later, she comes over to my place so that we can get ready to go out. My boyfriend was gonna go out with his friends and I was gonna go out with her. 2 seconds after she comes into my apartment, she walks out of the bathroom completely naked. And my boyfriend's just sitting there on the couch watching her. Part 3 is up. Story time about how my best friend walks around naked in front of my boyfriend. Disclaimer is not my story time, it's on me on Instagram. That's when she comes out completely naked. You could see everything. Boobs, butt, and V. And my boyfriend is sitting on the couch. As she comes out of the bathroom, his jaw drops to the floor. Then she says to me, oh my god, I couldn't find a towel, sorry. She walks straight into the guest bedroom where she has her clothes. My boyfriend and I look at each other and I'm completely disgusted. He, on the other hand, thought it was hilarious, so he starts laughing. Then she comes out of the guest bedroom in panties and a bra. I mean, I guess at least she wasn't naked this time. That's when I tell her, do you need help getting dressed or something? She says, oh no girl, I'm just thirsty, I'm gonna get something to drink. So I said to her, I'll get you something to drink, you can go get dressed. At this point, I had had it. But guess what? This wasn't the last time. A few weeks later, I wanted to go to her place to get ready this time. But then she insisted on coming over to mine instead. That's when I got the feeling that she had done all of that to get my boyfriend's attention. And I straight up told her, are you just walking around naked at my place just because you want my boyfriend to see you? Of course she denied it. She says he's cute, but he's not that cute. What? Part 4 is up. Storytime about how my best friend walks around naked in front of my boyfriend. Disclaimer, is not my story time, it's on Instagram. At this point, she had been naked in front of my boyfriend twice, but it wasn't the last time. She came over to pick me up one time and I told her to wait for me downstairs. Well, instead of waiting for me downstairs, she decided to come up to my apartment. While I was in the bedroom changing, my boyfriend let her in. That's when she comes straight into my bedroom without even knocking and says, hey girl, do you have a dress I can wear? The dress she was wearing was absolutely perfect. I asked her why and she said that she didn't feel sexy enough. Without even me saying yes, she started raiding my closet. Then she pulls out a very expensive dress I had not even put on yet. My boyfriend was standing in the doorway just watching the whole thing go down. I look at my boyfriend and he just rolls his eyes at me. Then out of nowhere, she takes off her dress and she's completely naked underneath. She looks at my boyfriend and says, oh, sorry, I didn't see you there. My boyfriend turned around and walked away. I finally closed the door and confronted her about it. She told me that I'm a prude and that I needed to relax. I kicked her out and we haven't spoken since. She's been begging to talk to me and hang out. My boyfriend told me that if I felt uncomfortable around her, then for her not to come over. But he says that he's fine with her. His reaction also upset me too. What should I do?
Story time about how I tried to stick up for this kid on the bus, but it got me suspended. So a little background information, I was 12 and in 7th grade. So it was a Wednesday, and when school ended, I got on the afternoon bus. And there was this boy named Josh that I was friends with. So I went and I sat next to him on the bus. After like 5 minutes of us waiting for the bus driver to get back on the bus, this boy named Kai that everybody loves for some reason comes over and rips me out of the seat. After that, he sits down next to Josh and starts punching him and screaming at him. So I grab this kid by his book bag, rip him out of the seat, and I sit next to Josh. I put my headphones in, plug in my phone, and this kid grabs the phone, throws it at the front of the bus. And there weren't any adults on the bus at this time because our bus driver was using the bathroom. And I didn't go up and get my phone because I knew that if I moved, this kid was probably going to hurt Josh again. So then this kid starts trying to punch me. So I punch him in the stomach. An adult comes on the bus, finally, like for part 2. Part 2 about how I got suspended for trying to stick up for some kid on the bus. So like I said, this kid is starting to try to punch me, so I punch him in the stomach. Finally, an adult gets on the bus. She yells at us to all sit down. And by the way, all the little fucking 12-year-olds had their phones out recording what was happening. So they look at the cameras, they were interviewing some of the kids, and Josh's sister comes up to me, and I was like, oh, shit. Hopefully, she's not going to yell at me. I don't know why she would, but still. She was like, hey, I just wanted to say thank you for sticking up for my brother. So then after a little bit, I hear my name get called on the speaker. Kai, Josh, and I were all called down to the office. All of our parents were there. Kai got a 3-day suspension, and I got a 3-week suspension. Even though I literally had scratches all over my freaking arms, and Kai didn't even have a bruise on him. Well, my mom, being the boss-ass bitch that she is, she told the school that if they went through with my suspension, she would call the news and tell them that my school was letting kids get away with bullying.
I hid under my boyfriend's bed for 2 days and tried to poison him. Disclaimer, is not my story time, it's on Instagram. My boyfriend and I had been dating for 3 months. And when we started dating, I got really jealous. He was my first boyfriend and I just didn't know how to control my feelings. You can say I'm pretty toxic. Part of the reason why I'm so insecure is because my boyfriend is probably one of the most popular guys in school. He's a basketball player and he's about to be drafted. So all the girls are constantly trying to hook up with him. And this drives me insane. Whenever we go out, girls are falling over trying to get to him. A few weeks ago, I heard a rumor that my boyfriend had hooked up with a girl. When I asked him about it, he got really defensive. He got so angry he punched a hole in my wall. And well, this made me start thinking, maybe he was cheating on me. So I basically started stalking him. And that's what I've been doing for the past 2 weeks. I'm even skipping class just to go wherever he's going. That's when I decided that I would hide in his room. I even put on a diaper. Part 2 is up. Put on the diaper so that I could hide under my boyfriend's bed without having to get out. Disclaimer, is not my story time, was sending me on Instagram. I even took soft food with me so that he wouldn't hear me chewing. I knew he wouldn't be home, so I snuck into his dorm room. That's when I checked his entire room. I went through all of his clothes, even went through all of his dirty laundry just to smell them and make sure he didn't have anything in his pockets. Searched in between the mattresses and I found nothing. At this point, I was just looking for a sign of him having hooked up with somebody. I knew he was going to be coming home soon, so I snuck under the bed. It was pretty hidden underneath there because it's a huge bed. He came in by himself and started changing and went to take a shower. But he took his phone with him into the bathroom, so I didn't have a chance to check it. By the way, he thought that I had gone home to my parents' house, so he wasn't going to be hanging out with me at all. As he was getting ready, he put on cologne, and that's when I knew he was going to go look for another girl. A few hours later, he comes back and I'm still underneath the bed. And guess what? He's with a girl. The same girl I heard the rumor about. They come in there laughing and I can tell that they're clearly drunk. This girl goes to the bathroom and changes into lingerie. And then they started making out on the bed while I'm hiding underneath it. Part 3 is up. My boyfriend is making out with this girl on his bed. I'm hiding underneath it. Suddenly, she starts talking about how she's so happy they're finally a couple. How she's so happy he got away from me since I was such a crazy ex. Clearly, my boyfriend had been poisoning me against her. That's when I realized I really couldn't blame the girl. My boyfriend had clearly told her that he had broken up with me and that now he was with her. My plan was to initially get out of the bed and surprise them, but instead I decided to wait. I managed to set up my phone while they were doing it on the bed, and I recorded the entire thing. After they finally finish, she leaves. My boyfriend goes to take a shower and I finally come out underneath the bed. And I sit on his bed. And the look on this man's face when he comes out of the bathroom, priceless. But the best part is that I was filming the entire thing. At this point, I was still wearing the diapers because I had been under his bed for 2 days. I'm obviously looking rough. Then I tell him that I've been under his bed for the entire 2 days. He started calling me crazy and he tried to kick me out. Then I told him that he needs to break up with the girl and come back with me. If he didn't, I would send the video around to the entire school, including his coach, who is the girl's dad. I got him pretty good. So now he's still my boyfriend, although it's forced, to get back at him somehow. I'll keep you guys updated. Bye.
Story time about how my mom got with my sister's boyfriend. So a little background information. I was 13 and in 8th grade, and my sister was a senior in high school and she was 17. And my sister always had a new boyfriend. Like after 3 months of dating somebody, they would break up and then she would be with a new guy a month later. And this started whenever she was a sophomore. So yeah, she had a lot of boyfriends. Anyway, so she had started dating this boy, and we're gonna call him Ben. Well, lucky for Ben, whenever they started dating was right around the time when we were supposed to go on our vacation that we take every year. So my mom and dad said that he could come with us. So my sister, who we're gonna call Emily, she decided to bring Ben, and I decided to bring one of my friends, Carly. We drove down, everything was good for the first 2 days, and usually what would happen on this vacation is my dad would end up staying at the hotel and doing work while we were all out doing stuff. So my mom, Ben, and Emily were all out drinking at the bar 24/7. Like for part 2. Part 2 about how my mom got with my sister's boyfriend. So like I said, Emily, Ben, and my mom were out drinking 24/7 at the bar. And since this was a vacation that we took every year, my sister already knew a bunch of people down there. The one night my mom started feeling really sick at the bar, so Ben offered to take her back to the hotel. And at this time, my friend, my dad, and I were all down at the buffet in the hotel. So Ben took my mom upstairs to our hotel room, and my dad was like, "Oh, do you guys want to walk down to the fair?" We said yes, so he told us to go upstairs and get his wallet. So my friend and I go up in the elevator to our room, and I want to say this was about 20 or 30 minutes after Ben and my mom had went upstairs. So we get into the room, we hear the shower running, which was weird because we didn't think anybody was there. So instead of me calling my dad because it might have been a murderer, I go, and the door is slightly creaked open, so I look through the door, and obviously I could hear you know what, but hers and his clothes were on the floor. Like for part 3.
The asshole for wanting to expose my lying, cheating mother. A month ago, I borrowed my mom's phone and she had no idea, but I looked at all of her apps and found that she was cheating with multiple men. I'm 26 years old and my parents have now been married for 30 years. I actually got separated when I graduated from high school, but then they got back together a few years later. My mom has always been the one that wants to separate my dad, but he keeps wanting to get back together with her. My dad is actually in love with this woman. He adores her. He does everything for her. He's super affectionate with her, loves to take her out on dates, gives her so much of his time, and she still doesn't appreciate it. I've always been closer to my dad than my mom. My mom's always trying to find an excuse to go party with her friends, but now I know why. Like I said, I ended up borrowing her phone and she probably didn't expect me to go snooping. And honestly, it wasn't even my intention. I'm scrolling on her phone and I see the app Tinder. I nearly fell out of my seat. So I quickly scrolled through everything and started taking pictures. My mom was sending nudes to random men. Part 2 is up. I the asshole for wanting to expose my lying, cheating mother. That's when I saw that she was sending nudes to men on different apps. Not only was she on Tinder, she was also on Bumble and an app for older people. Mind you, my father is still in love with this woman. I managed to take pictures of everything on the apps. Here's the worst part. Start going through her messages and that's when I found that she has a boyfriend. At that point, I didn't know how long they'd been together. Now I know that she's been with him for 6 months. So every single time she goes on her weekend trips with her friends, she's actually with her boyfriend. And get this, she uses my dad's money to pay for everything. An entire week passed asked before I confronted her. First, I didn't know how to confront her, but I had to just do it. Every time I saw my dad, I would start to cry and he was worried about me. I didn't have the heart to tell my dad until I confronted my mom. I went up to her and I showed her all the receipts I had. Then she got pissed at me for looking through her phone. By the way, at this point, I'm still living with my parents. That's when she threatened to kick me out of the house if I told my dad anything. My own mother threatening me. Then she tried to smack me across the face, so I smacked her. Part 3 is up. Am I the asshole for wanting to expose my lying, cheating mother? After she slapped me, I slapped her back. And I slapped her so hard she actually fell on the floor. I instantly felt bad and tried to apologize. That's when she started to cry and I started to cry. I asked her to just be honest with me and tell me the truth. She told me that she wasn't in love with my dad anymore, but that she felt bad for him because he was still in love with her. And that she'd been dating this new guy for 6 months. She even confessed that she was addicted to going on dating apps and flirting with men. That's when I told her she needed to tell my dad. That she needed to stop using his money to take her boyfriend out. Then another confession. He had spent over $25,000 on hotels that she would book for her and her new boyfriend. And apparently this guy was broke. He couldn't pay for himself. She tried to negotiate with me. If I don't tell my dad, she'd break up with her boyfriend and stop using the apps. I mean, she's my mother and I don't want to cause her pain, but it's my dad. I ended up telling her that I wouldn't tell my dad. But 2 nights ago, my dad went on a work trip. My mom is so stupid she actually snuck in her boyfriend through her window. I heard them doing the dirty all night. And now she's begging me again not to tell my dad. I'm planning on telling my dad tonight. I'll have to keep you guys updated. Give me advice.
Story time about how I almost got kidnapped by my online boyfriend. So a little background information, I was 16 and in 11th grade. So a year before this all happened, I posted a picture on Instagram saying, add me on Snapchat if you want to be friends. Yes, I was that person. Okay, so this really cute guy adds me on Snapchat, and after about 3 months talking, he said that he wants to meet me in person. And he didn't sound sus at all, so I was like, sure. So we met at this park that was like 30 minutes away. We met there around 6 o'clock, so when the sun was setting. And he was super nice, it was super romantic. Well, then we went to his house, we watched a movie, and we did the nasty. So after that, he asked me if I want a drink. And what I could have swore was 20 minutes later, I wake up in an abandoned farm shed. No clothes or anything. So I start screaming my head off. I don't have my phone or anything, so I start to run. And then he grabs me. He says, if you try to run or you try to scream, I am going to kill you. Life for part 2 about how I almost got kidnapped by my online boyfriend. So like I said, I wake up in this abandoned farm shed. I don't have no clothes. I don't have a phone. So I try to run and he grabs me. He says that if you run, I will kill you. So I was like, okay, fine. What do you want from me? So he starts putting on lingerie and tells me to also put some on so we can take pictures together. What the actual you-know-what? So after that, he starts crying and he starts telling me his whole life story and how he's not who I think he is. Turns out that he's 32 and he just goes online pretending that he's 17 years old. So I just try to comfort him, right? It ends up working. He brings me my clothes, tells me to run or else he's going to once again kill me. So I run, I go to this gas station, get picked up by the police, find my parents. Luckily for me, I paid attention to where everything was. He was arrested, he's still in prison to this day, and I got grounded for 3 months.
Storytime about how my husband died and his best friend won't leave me alone. Disclaimer, this is not my story time, it's sending me on Instagram. My husband and I were married for almost a decade. During that time, we had 2 kids. And of course, his passing was completely devastating to our families. And 2 weeks after my husband died, I was still grieving. But his best friend started coming around our house a lot. First, he was very emotional. Him and my husband were best friends for about 7 years. They saw each other almost every day. Not only did they work together, but they also would go to the gym together and pretty much hang out all the time. So I know this guy really, really well. When my husband would invite him over, I never got the feeling that he liked me. I mean, sure, sometimes I caught him staring at me, but I'm beautiful, so I understand. So after my husband passed, he started coming over as in, I want to take care of you, and we would just kind of cry together. I took this as his way of trying to help my husband, you know, so I just thought he was being really sweet. But exactly 1 month after my husband passed away, he started asking me weird questions. Number 1, do you want to start dating again? Number 2, don't you feel lonely at night? Number 3, you're still so young and beautiful, you need to give yourself a chance with someone else. Mind you, I'm still grieving. To these questions, I would usually say no. Obviously, I mean, why would I even be thinking about those things? I didn't put too much mind to the questions, but a few days later he came over after he had been at a bar. As soon as I opened the door to him, he said, can I kiss you? And then he did without me saying yes. Part 2, story time about how my dead husband's best friend won't leave me alone. Disclaimers, is not my story time, was sending me on Instagram. As soon as I opened the door, he asked me if he could kiss me and I didn't say anything. And he grabbed me and just started kissing me. Of course I pushed him away and told him that he needed to leave. That's when he said, but you didn't say no. I told him I didn't say anything because I was shocked he would even ask me that. That's when he walked into the house without me inviting him, went straight to the fridge and opened up a beer. Then he starts yelling at me for giving him mixed signals. He says that since my husband died, all I've been doing is flirting with him. Since when is grieving flirting? I told him that he was completely wrong and that he needed to leave again. Then he said, no, I'm not leaving here until you tell me the truth. truth. That I was secretly in love with him and that I actually wanted to be with him. No, this wasn't funny to me at all. He was slurring his words and barely could stand up. I knew my kids were upstairs, so all I wanted to do was get him out of the house. That's when I grabbed my phone and started texting one of my other husband's best friends. I texted him 911, please come to our house now. He responded right away saying, I'm coming over. After another minute of this guy ranting at me, I told him I was sorry for giving him mixed signals and that was never my intention, blah blah blah. Then he asked me out on a date. He said that he wanted to take me out and show me a good time. I said no, and I asked him to leave again, but he wouldn't. Finally, someone knocks on the door. Part 3 is on. Storytime about how my dead husband's best friend won't leave me alone. Disclosed on my Storytime instead of me on Instagram. That's when he asked me out on a date and started walking closer to me. Finally, someone knocked on the door, and it was my other husband's friend who I texted to come help me. I ran over to the door quickly and I opened it. That's when my husband's best friend, who was drunk in my house asking me out on a date, forcing me to kiss him, tells the other guy that he needs to leave. So I asked the other friend if he could just take this guy home. He said, yeah, of course. And he told him, you're drunk, I'm gonna take you home now. They left together without incident and I was really relieved. But after that, I knew to watch my back now. So here's what happened. He started texting me every now and then asking me if I wanted to go to dinner. And I would not even respond to him. And after that, he started showing up to different places I was at. For example, I go to Pilates classes 5 times a week. This place is near my house. And one day he just showed up trying to take a class. As soon as I saw him, I told the instructor and they kicked him out. That's when he came back and said that he did nothing wrong and that he deserved to be in the class too. He even paid the year up front. So they had no choice but to let him in. Instead, I left. Then he followed me outside to the parking lot and told me that I needed to relax. Said it's not like I'm following you, which he clearly was. I got in my car and left. That very same night, he sent me a message apologizing for acting crazy. Then he told me that all he wanted was just to be close to me and the kids. By the way, my kids really do love him. They ask about him all the time since he stopped coming over, and I don't even know what to tell them. After a few weeks of him not acting crazy, he asked me if he could come over and I said yes. Decided to invite all my husband's friends and we had a nice dinner. But again, this guy asked me out. I said no, but my best friend thinks I should give him a shot. He's good looking and rich. What do you guys think?
Story time. My boyfriend cheated on me with the girl best friend. So a little background information. I was 17 and a junior in high school, and my boyfriend and I have been dating for a year. But just a little backstory about when we got together. So there were definitely some red flags that I missed, okay? One of them being that he had a girl best friend. And I don't care what y'all have to say if that makes me insecure or what. But coming from someone who has been the girl best friend, I knew this was not good at all. Especially whenever we first started dating and she was still being super friendly with him. Meaning she would hold his hand, she would hang on him 24/7. And when I told him, I was super uncomfortable with that. And I felt like there needed to be some boundaries. He was like, yeah, I told you what it was whenever we got together. So if you don't like that, then just break up with me. Looking back on it now, that was also a red flag. Because I feel like he was telling me to break up with him so that way he didn't have to break up with me, like for part 2. Part 2 about how my boyfriend cheated on me with the girl best friend. So like I said, she would still hang all over him, and he pretty much told me, if you don't like that, then you can leave. Obviously, I did not want to leave because I liked him and he was my boyfriend. So I just kept putting up with it, and eventually, you know, we got 6 months into our relationship. So at that point, I'm thinking maybe I have a little bit more authority, you know, to be like, hey, I don't like the way that he acts around you. You guys can't hang out like that anymore. And they would hang out alone together. He would take her to dinner. So I literally tried telling him that the stuff that they do together is relationship stuff. And he was like, that's not true at all because we did all of this stuff before you and I even got together. So anyways, like I said, 6 months in, I'm like, hey, I don't like the way that you guys are hanging around each other. Once again, he gives me the same excuse. So he pretty much said that he didn't care. And the one night him and I were supposed to hang out, but he canceled on me last minute. And her and I didn't get along, and she never Snapchatted me before, but then I get a Snapchat of her and him making out at his house.
My brother-in-law keeps trying to hook up with me. Should I tell my husband? My husband is a very, very jealous man. He can't stand it when I get hit on or even stared at. The few times that I've gotten hit on in front of him, he actually started a fight with the guy. So I basically live in fear of anybody hitting on me in front of him. He's also very jealous with our friends. We have a really big group of friends and a lot of them are males. He's outright told our male friends to not touch me or ever even hug me or kiss me when they see me. By the way, a lot of these guys are already married and in relationships. So the fact that my husband does that is just ridiculous. It's obviously humiliating to me. The only person my husband is not jealous of is his own brother. And at first I thought this was a good thing. His brother offered to move in with us while we were renovating our house. My husband and him basically work all day on the house. I get to work from home, so I'm usually in my own office. A few weeks ago, my brother-in-law started coming into my office. First he would just talk to me, and then it turned into flirting. Then he started insinuating how good looking I was, how lucky my husband is. Part 2 is up. My brother-in-law keeps trying to hook up with me. Should I tell my jealous husband? That's when he started coming into my office to flirt with me. He would compliment everything about me. He would tell me that I had a great body, that I had a beautiful face. I know that he could visibly see how uncomfortable it made me, but he kept going. Of course, it never occurred to me to tell my husband because of how violent he gets when he's jealous. And he knew that, which is why he kept pushing it. One day, my husband and him went to a local bar after finishing up work at home. When they came home, my husband was completely wasted. My brother-in-law put my husband in our bed and told me that I should get him some water. I went down to the kitchen to grab my husband a bottle of water, but my brother-in-law followed me into the kitchen, cornered me up against the fridge, and tried to kiss me. By the way, I could smell the alcohol on him, so I knew he was drunk. I pushed him away and told him not to touch me. That's when he started apologizing. He said, "I thought you wanted it." As I started walking away, he grabbed my arm and kissed me. But the truth is, part of me liked it. Truthfully, I always found my brother-in-law very attractive. By the way, it's not like I just let him kiss me. I was trying to fight him off. When he let me go, I slapped him and I ran upstairs. Of course, I avoided him after that. A few days later, I was having dinner with my friends when my brother-in-law shows up at the restaurant and sits at a table right across from us. He proceeded to just stare at me the whole time. Finally got up to the bathroom and he followed me. That's when he grabbed me and kissed me again. Part 3 is up.
Story time about how my sister was hooking up with my boyfriend. Little background information, I was 15 and in 10th grade, and I have never had a boyfriend before. Any guy that I was sort of talking to, we never made it out of the talking stage. But fast forward, I met this one guy who we're gonna call Jake, and because of how tragic my love life was, I didn't expect us to get into a relationship, but he ended up asking me to be his girlfriend. So of course I said yes. I was super excited that I had a boyfriend, and then he met my family. And my older sister and I were like super close, so I told her all about him, and she just couldn't wait to meet him. Real quick, I just want to give a big shout out to Lumino for sponsoring today's video. Lumino Whitening Kit is one of the best ways to whiten your teeth without paying hundreds of dollars, especially if you have sensitive teeth. This is the next best thing. Although I have veneers, they only cover the front of my teeth, so my teeth can still be very sensitive to certain chemicals that other brands use in their products. If you guys want to go check out their 7-pack for under $15, the link is in my bio. So whenever he met my sister, she was being super talkative to him, and I thought it was just because she was excited to meet him, like for part 2. Part 2 about how I found out my sister was hooking up with my boyfriend. So like I said, he came over, he met my sister, they got along super well. Fast forward, my parents decided to have a family gathering, and my sister was like begging me to invite my boyfriend, which I didn't plan on inviting him at all because my family is super annoying and would make a big deal about the fact that this is my first boyfriend. She was like, "Okay, but if you guys are seriously in a relationship, I think that he should meet your family." So I ended up inviting him. So my mom called me to the kitchen to help pass out drinks, which was super annoying because my sister was literally doing fucking nothing. So after I'm done with that, I'm looking for my boyfriend and he's nowhere to be found. So I go upstairs, and as I'm about to walk up the stairs, both of them come down. And when I asked what was wrong, like why they were upstairs together, she was like, "Oh, I was showing him to the bathroom," which I felt super weird about, but because she was my sister, I let it go because you're supposed to trust your family. Stuff started. Part 3 about how my sister got with my boyfriend. So things started to get really sus because every time that he would come over, they would always find a way to be alone with each other. So fast forward, my sister and I are supposed to go to one of her friends' parties. The whole time though, she kept asking me if I would invite my boyfriend. And no offense, I love my boyfriend, but I need space away from him sometimes. And not to mention, I felt like I was dragging him around like a dog because she was the one who would want me to invite him everywhere. Fast forward, I end up inviting him to the party. My sister gets super drunk, really sick, and my boyfriend offers to take her to the bathroom. And I was like, "Excuse me, I'm her sister. I can do that. Thank you very much." So after I say that, my sister looks at me and she was like, "I would appreciate it if you would just stop being like this because I feel super sick right now." Like, okay, play the victim. Anyway, so I go to check on them in the bathroom. They're not in there. And one of the bedroom doors was open, so when I went in there, I saw them doing the nasty. I asked her how long this had been going on, and she said it was since the first time that they met. And now I'm ignoring my sister until she goes to college.
Am I the asshole for choosing my family over my wife? Yes. Unless your wife is like batshit crazy, then no. But typically your wife in most circumstances should come first because you chose to create a future with her, and that should be your main focus moving on. Your family will always be there, but that your relationship is very delicate and that should be your number one priority. My 33 male goals for the year were to buy a house and get married. I managed to achieve all of them successfully. It's important for me to have my parents live with me because it's a part of my tradition. I've asked several girls about this, but they all refused when it came to living with my parents. My parents, 62 male, 58 female, are very nice and sweet, always encouraging me to do whatever makes me happy. I've been living in the US for the past decade, and I finally met a girl, 28 female, who was cute and sweet. On our first date, I asked if she'd be okay with living with my parents, and she said, "I don't see why not, if they're nice people." I wanted to get married before the year ended to save on taxes, but she wasn't ready and she needed more time. Okay, homie's literally looking at this extremely transactional. Who ended up getting married anyway, and this was before she met my parents properly. My wife is half Indian, and her country of origin allowed my green card to be processed in months instead of taking 10 plus years, which would have been the case based on my country. However, this wasn't the reason I chose to marry her. Sure, buddy. Okay, it's convenient. My wife and I got along well because we loved each other. She accepts me as I am, including my mental disorder, partying habits, and everything. Once my parents moved in after marriage, she became sad and depressed, started drinking, stopped eating, and felt trapped. 2 months later, she finally told me that she was uncomfortable living with my parents. She even considered divorce, saying that if she spent time with my parents beforehand, she wouldn't have married me. I'm not willing to ask my parents to move out, but I also don't want to lose the love of my life. Some of her reasons seemed valid, and I eventually started working on addressing them. Having lived apart from my parents for over 10 years, I found it awkward to bring up certain issues with them at first. I admit that my family and siblings can be a bit chaotic at times, but they're wonderful people. We are a close-knit family and share everything, whereas my wife comes from a more stoic family where they don't openly share their feelings. She's never had to compromise before, and I can see that she's not even trying to adjust living with my parents. However, she does care about their well-being. She just doesn't want to live with them for more than 2 months a year. She says they're still young and healthy, and she's okay living with them if they become sick or after one of them has passed. For now, she wants to enjoy our newly married life alone for 2 to 4 years. So far, I've told her that's not an option, but she's getting worse mentally and physically, and the stress is causing her health issues as confirmed by doctors. I allow her to go. Did you just say I allow her? I allow her? I allow her to go to her cousin's house or even her home country for months at a time when my parents visit for her mental health. I'm compromising living without her. Lately, she's even started ignoring my parents as a way to show them that she's unhappy with the situation. My family is emotionally dependent on me. It's not easy. Okay, emotionally, but not financially. She wants to talk openly and resolve this, even if it means ending our marriage or finding a solution. I don't want to do either because I don't want to trust my parents who have underlying health issues that could worsen. My parents dreamed of living with me once I got married, and they were so happy to be here. My dad gets depressed because he has nothing to do besides watching TV or using his phone. They also want a baby ASAP because they're bored, but my wife and I aren't ready for at least another 3 to 4 years. They've tried to convince her multiple times, which has only made her angry. She sees them as strangers living with her indefinitely. I want to have kids while my parents are still well so that they can create memories with my kids. I don't think we will ever divorce, but she is hesitating to have a kid given our living situation. Most of our friends are envious of our relationship, and our quick marriage has inspired 2 of our friends to get married. She's nice, funny, and well-liked by my friends. I know she truly loved me, but as time goes on, the stress is taking a toll on her. If I let her go, my parents will feel responsible and be devastated until I get married again. Even if I do remarry, I can't be sure the situation won't happen again. I feel truly guilty as I'm ruining her life. I'm willing to let her go for her peace if she chooses to. Everything would be fine if she could just accept my parents as her own, as they don't ask her for anything and are self-sufficient. They are trying hard to win her approval, but she just ignores it. All she wants is me. However, 1 to 2 months a year with my parents isn't enough for me or them. I want them to be with me forever. Once I get my citizenship, I also want to bring my siblings over. Maybe I should have married an Indian girl from India, but I've become too westernized in the past 10 years, and I don't think a traditional girl would accept me. I really want this to work. At the moment, nobody involved seems as happy. I'm giving it time. It does seem like everybody has started to ignore the issue and move on. After years of feeling her resentment growing towards me and her love is fading, but I'm constantly trying to cheer her up. Okay, wow. Yeah, you're the asshole. I'm sorry. This was really bad. You want your wife to have a child because your parents are bored? That is not how this works. Holy moly, your priorities are not aligned. I don't think you really understand what it means to be married, right? Someone born and raised in America, right? I do not have a problem with my in-laws living with me, vice versa, if there is a need for it, right? If you're saying your parents are fully capable, self-sufficient adults, there's no need for them to be living with you guys, especially as a newlywed. As a newlywed, I would say, hey, please at least give us 1 or 2 years together. God forbid something happens. One of them is very sick, detrimentally ill, someone passes away and they need us, I got you. Don't worry about that. But I want them with me is not a sufficient enough reason for them to be living with us right off the bat. And like, you can't say living with my parents is tradition. Bro, you've been without them for 10 years. Now that you got your green card and you can bring them now, you want them to live with you? You got to have an agreement with your siblings where you can do 8 months with them, 2 months with you, 2 months with someone else.